Informação e coordenação do .br. Tecnologias da informação e comunicação, implementação de pontos de troca de tráfego local na internet, projetos que contribuem no desenvolvimento global da web e muito mais. Tudo isso porque o IX.br é uma entidade civil de direito privado e sem fins lucrativos, que mantém uma estrutura de registro de domínio segura, estável e de confiança, e reverte parte do que você paga pelo seu domínio no desenvolvimento de infraestrutura, trazendo benefícios para todos que usam a internet no Brasil. Toda essa inovação, tecnologia de ponta, segurança e infraestrutura só é possível porque você tem um domínio .br. IX.br, sempre em busca do melhor para a nossa internet.
Já imaginou se você não tivesse seu direito à liberdade de expressão respeitado? Se seus dados particulares fossem divulgados sem autorização? Ou se você tivesse sua navegação filtrada por causa de interesses comerciais? A liberdade de expressão, a privacidade e a neutralidade da rede são fundamentais para a internet. E esses são apenas alguns dos 10 princípios formulados pelo Comitê Gestor da Internet no Brasil. O CGI.br promove há mais de 20 anos a internet no país. Graças a ele, você tem constante inovação, segurança e diretrizes para o desenvolvimento da internet. Isso tudo é feito de forma colaborativa, transparente e democrática. O comitê é formado por representantes de todos os setores da sociedade. Assim, as decisões são tomadas por meio do diálogo, com a participação de todos os membros até que um consenso seja alcançado. Por esses e outros fatores, o modelo brasileiro de governança se tornou referência no mundo todo. CGI.br, por uma internet cada vez melhor no Brasil.
Hello there, this is Steve Crocker.
Olá, Brasil! This is Nina from the internet.
Olá a todas e todos.
So happy 30th anniversary.
Congratulations on this historic 30th anniversary.
Muitos parabéns pelos 30 anos.
So congratulations on all of the enormous achievements of CGI.br in the last 30 years.
Muchas felicitaciones y muchas gracias por todo el apoyo.
Bom dia.
Good morning.
Saudações aí para todo mundo que está presente aqui.
Let me welcome all the participants on site, those who have joined us online. This event is being broadcasted in English and Portuguese. So both those who are online and those who are here in this auditorium, if you have anyone who couldn't make this time, just let them know that if they access our channel or YouTube, they'll be able to follow the whole event. We are going to have 2 links available, one to the morning session and another one to the afternoon. So today we are about to resume our second day, and this is the IX Forum Fortaleza. Yesterday we had a very rich day with Renata Miele in the opening session together with Julio and David Góes. Following that, we had a panel about norm number 4, followed by a connectivity panel with the participation of ETISIC, RNP, Abranet, Click IP, Claro Brazil. We had presentations about traffic engineering. If you could put down a little bit my mic volume. Thanks. Recess. We also had a panel about traffic engineering and community, followed by a Blue Marine presentation addressing submarine cables. We also had RNP talking about the use of AI, and Fabio from IX.br talking about the implementation of segment routing in the IX.br CMETS update. And To conclude, we had a panel with the global team Energy Uno about streaming. It was a very profitable day yesterday, and those who couldn't follow yesterday's activities, please follow the YouTube recording where you'll be able to get tuned to everything. Today, we are going to have another very important day. We have around 60 people who joined us online. How about the video and audio transmission quality before we effectively open today's agenda? Please let us know, give us your feedback. Is everything okay? Wonderful. Milton Kashuakura is my boss, and he is IX.br's director, and he's responsible by IX.br, by Septron, by our workshops, initiatives, measurement, and others. So please, Milton, can you officially open today's activities? Thank you. Good morning, guys. Let me open today's activities with the following. Anytime we talk about norm 4, a model applied by the CGI, a model which encompasses several sectors, the multi-sectorial model, which is a model that led us to be where we are today. And this model, not just here in Brazil, but also somewhere else, it's under sort of an attack. So you should also try to understand what the matter is and what this kind of changes that might happen, but which we hope will never come true, will result into the future. We got and we are where we are thanks to our project IXP, counting on everyone's collaborations. This is a joint effort which does not belong just to IX.br, but to everyone. Anytime we are after international partners to help us and to participate with that, internet is the best as a whole. You also understood that we were designing more autonomous systems, and today Brazil is ranked in second place. We are just lagging behind the United States of America, where internet was created. So this is essential. The quantity of autonomous systems is key to guarantee a resilient network. And apparently, Brazil, have the most resilient internet in the globe, thanks to a number of autonomous systems. If any autonomous system has a problem, others, can cope with that. So we were in a very comfortable position. When we participate at international events, everyone, turns their heads to Brazil. They want to know what we are doing, and we have to keep doing what we are doing as the rest of the world is looking at us, probably because we are doing the right things. And we have to defend our model, and we also have to advocate for everything else we do. And on a forum like this one, we started IX Forum first in São Paulo, the first edition We just invited all participants to have a beer by the end of the day, and we exchanged experiences, relationship, and we became closer. Then we thought about a second IX Forum with a little bit more of content. And today we have IX Forum every single year in São Paulo. And now we are, for the third time, carrying out an IX Forum in Fortaleza. An event like that is exactly to bring together all this collaboration between everyone, where everybody will be able to make business, to solve their problems, because with several participants it's much easier. There are new ideas to be shared, to be able to deliver a better internet to all. We bet around 2008 and 9 that we would be able to organize forums in Fortaleza since at that time when submarine cables would just go through here. There was not one single bit of internet going through Fortaleza, but slowly and with lots of perseverance, the submarine cables companies, they made available internet traffic to our region, and now Fortaleza is the second place for XPs with the largest traffic, and it's also the second one in number of participants. So I hope you get the scenario for the north and northeast region. In Fortaleza, geographically speaking, you are much closer to the United States of America, closer to Europe, to Africa. We usually say that people from Fortaleza, they are privileged because somehow they get international content before anybody else. So being in Fortaleza is much faster to communicate to the rest of the world. But such a difference is a difference of milliseconds. So it's not really perceived. You can just perceive some sort of a difference if the latency go over 100 milliseconds. So Brazil, north to south, does not reach those 120 seconds. So we have São Paulo first, Fortaleza second, thanks to these collaborations. It's important to strengthen events like that so people may relate one to another. That's important. The community has to get strong, and we can make a better internet to all. So I see a full house today, and I'd like to congratulate you all for Fortaleza to be ranked so well. Shall we start? We have a number of interesting topics to address here today, and wish you a very fruitful day. Thank you, Milton. Please, we have to take a picture, photograph. Still along the same lines, as we are talking about challenges to face as to internet governance. Yesterday we had a panel about norm number 4. I don't know if you had a chance to follow. If not, take a look. And we also have a bill which changes completely the internet governance. And then internet governance is be under Anatel. And we believe that internet is a collective work and not just telco. Even IX.br, which is a more physical structure that is more based on data centers, softwares, router servers, and other elements which are not simply telco, BGP protocols, and many other elements which are technical and at other layers of the network. So please stay tuned about the notes that CGI has communicated. I usually talk to ecosystem teams, and there are people who don't even know about that. They haven't got the faintest idea. So you who are mainly providers, please talk to your peers, to your colleagues. In case any changes will be made, I hope they'll be made on a conscious manner with everyone's participation after a huge debate with everyone's involvement and not just out of the blue. Next is Gilberto Zorello from IX.br to talk about important practices to guarantee providers' security. Good morning. I am Professor Zorello. I coordinate a program for a more secure internet. I coordinate the program for a safer net who aims to work with the technical committee in the adoption of best practices. And that is the topic of my event. I'll talk about the program and give you some updates. This is a topic which I have been emphasizing at different events, and today I'll give you an overview about the program and some updates about the latest news. The program aims to reduce DDoS attacks, to improve routing security, to help to solve setup problems, to improve the resolution on names, to see best security practices, and to work with the community to improve their security culture. Anything that we do, it should be taught with security. Clients update, it's very important to think about that. This is a program's overview where there are several activities. You go from an internet which is more problematic, and thanks to IX.br's actions, such as CertBR, who is responsible for a notification work, who has got a notification from Surge here about open doors, and they are sent to, make an alert to the ASs and expose the services which may suffer some sort of attack. This is one of the actions. In addition, a number of workshops, we understand that training, education, knowledge, as how to configure a network is very important. So there is a group, a training group, which is responsible for all the educational training. even the educational materials, the IX configuration as to filters to reduce any problematic traffic which goes through the IX. So that program involves a number of different areas of IX.br. I have some illustrations to exemplify where the problems are and where the actions are. So we have here a network with several ASs. Actually, you have three autonomous systems where you may have an attacker from one certain provider, probably the one more on the left, which will identify an open door in the lower network, the 303 network, and they explore that service to attack a different network, which shows the importance of security configurations to be adopted everywhere, because one internet may attack another one. So that shows the importance to set up your internet really well, otherwise you may have a problem which will affect the rest of the internet. This is a type of reflexive attack. And to be done, first, anti-spoofing filters. That is key, because it allows that packages that do not have a return address destination will leave their internet. I mean packages that can be used to attack the reflexive in other networks. And second, to properly set up your service to avoid this type of reflection. And it's up to CERT to notify and treat them fast. What are then the services which are more explored? NTP, DNS. We can go into details about that. CERT notifies 19 services. It researches monthly, routinely, 19 services that may be used in an attack like that, and notifies. This is a number of notifications, 142,000 IP addresses being notified monthly, which were not corrected. So this is a piece of information which lets us know that we still have a problem. In our past event, we had 165,000. We improved, but this is still not enough. Is that the case all over the country? I don't know. Let's take a look at the Northeast. Is that any different? So I got this summary from the Northeast survey. The scenario is very similar except for NTP. How come? Why is it different? Because the NTP service open in the larger carriers and they are registered outside the northeastern region. That's why there is a reduction. Large operators, large carriers, they have problems. Yes, they do. The rest of those 20,000, they have a problem. Yes. 9,000, around 9,000 of them, they have issues. Those who are notified are the ones who get an AS, who have an AS. So the problem is there. It has to be dealt. And how about time evolution? The problem started in 2018. There was an evolution, but still there are 142,000 open doors. 5 services were notified in the beginning. Today, 19. And to reduce the DDoS attacks, other aspects are very important, such as network config and authentication, to work with the safe passwords, to use a double factor verifications, to use safe protocols, to monitor the network. It's important to understand the traffic that is going through your network. It is necessary to make this type of analysis to keep the systems up to date. The services which you don't use, just close them down. You are going to improve considerably the whole scenario to keep registers where you'll be able to monitor your network configurations, backup, updated scripts. Internet users, technicians, classify them level 1, level 2, level 3, and the different types of devices and equipments that they have to access. The presentation will become available to you here during the event and also in the event's website. I like sharing information from different regions. So if you visit our website, you are going to find information about other regions and some links about best practices. So our recommendation is that you take a look. Manners. Manners tries to solve routing problems. Manners are 4 best practices which were created because the BGP is not confident. The Manners project is started with, it's managed by another entity, and they have anti-spoofing filters, some contact points, and Manners. It's a coordination between carriers, operators, so all the security issues can be solved. Your integration is key. And events like that aim to do exactly that. And also routing policies, both in the IRR and RPKI. And what is your routing policy? And that has to be registered both in the IRR and into the RPKI. This is another network scenario, and the ones to the right, they announce their prefixes, they advertise their prefixes. So some routing tables are made, the client asks for a services, and that service is given. However, there is another one which makes another advertising, and then the traffic will be detoured to another internet due to configuration errors or due to some malicious involvement. A network would like to change the traffic to another one, and according to Manners, they implement the BGP filters. And this is the first Manners actions. A different scenario. There are several. we have some hijacking and leakage. The route leak. In the route leak, we have two networks and then they announce both to internets and to peers, and due to some configuration mistakes, the network learns and promotes that internet prefix, and the internet then has two ways to the traffic, and that will have an traffic. So the traffic can get back to that network 540. This is not very good to this because it will have its internet being occupied, and probably that is due to a configuration error. Again, filters implementations. We cannot let your network to announce what it should not be announced. So Manners talks about that. Anti-spoofing, contact points that you have to keep up to date, both in the IRR, RPKI, and in the WHOIS in the register. The contact points, they have to be up to date. They have to be effectively working within your organization so you can reach the notifications properly. CERT sends notifications and got a number of error messages. The contact points in the WHOIS, they are invalid. So in the program, I received that list and I tried to talk to those ASs. A different scenario is the registration. The contact points, and to those cases where they don't get an answer, they may reach a process of block IP recovery. Imagine a network today losing IP blocks for not complying with the email addresses. That has been voted by the technical community at LACNIC. Abuse contact points is very important and has to be briefly managed by the networks. And the router policy, where you have to register in the URL and in the IRR, and RPKI. There is an increasing number of RPKI adoption in Brazil, and we are around 50-50, a little bit less than half of the ads. They are IPv6, IPv4, and they are registered in RPKI. And RPKI, let's not forget that in addition to the publication, we have validation. You publish in the RPKI to avoid being a victim of a hijacking. You publish to tell to the web that if any network gets an ad that does not with, they have to be validated, they have to be refused and not accepted. With that, you avoid a hijacking. And validation is key, so you do not participate at any hijacking scenario. And I insist on that because it's common talking to providers and people don't have this sort of understanding. Publishing the ROAS and to install a validation base for the BGP messages received by internet. There is a recent article exemplifying how RPKI works. In the past, it was hijacked, and after they implemented RPKI, there was a similar attack, and the effects were much lower. This is a recent article which I would fully recommend you to read it. Some numbers. Those who are manners participants, they make available a tool called Manners Observatory. That is and you can see what is going on in terms of security on your network. And that tool also gives us some AS information and the country as a whole. Here I have some information from Brazil. There is no incidents. Do they happen in Brazil? Yes, they do. This is a May overview from 1 to May 27, May 1st to 27, with 39 incidents of hijacking, a total of 55 problems. How many ASs were responsible? 44. There are 44 into the autonomous systems, which should improve BGP configs. And also about router. And as to what is announced in the web, what is registered, and what has ROA registered in the RPKI. To IRR, which is a much older base and more advanced, but RPKI, there are 43,000 registered ROAs, IPv4 and IPv6, right? And 48,000 which are still unknown. And last year, we had somewhat around 35,000. So there was some increase. And a large carrier implemented RPKI as a result of the work that IX does. We have specifically trained this operator. We had a number of sections. It took them a while, but they implemented. In the same dashboard, it gives us a diagram about the best practices, about the AS readiness with some criteria. And they don't just look at the point, but the operation in their last year. 32% of ASs, they are ready for RPKI, although the number of registries are bigger than that. It's very common to find a scenario where the server that keeps the ROAs, they are no longer in the air. So it's a lack of, the matter of lacking management. This is a similar overview. Manners participant. You may become a manners participant and adopt the stamp of the manners in your website. This is a way to show to the community that you worry about security. So Brazilian participants, an updated 302, we represented 29% in the globe. We keep growing, but slowly. There is much more to do. So we have overcome 300, and the manners in the world is around 1,200. Kindness is a way to look after names resolution. It's very important to look after your site domain, the domain that you use in your website or your email services that has to be signed by DNSSEC. And it is a provider's responsibility to look after their recursive. They have to have their own recursive, which has to validate DNSSEC. In such a way, you will guarantee a web navigation to your customer in a much more security manner, and you end up beneficiating yourself being a provider if you take those additional security measures. Kindness is a best practices which was proposed by ICANN, and they address website security matters or authoritatives and also recursives best practices, and we recommend that you look after that. I will not go into details about this scheme. When an attacker monitor all the messages that DNS sends with an open text, it monitors and it gives you fast answers. With that, recursive DNS is poison, as their updated cache, they have to do with all the queries for that domain, which will be detoured to a website which is of the attacker's interest. There are other ways to poison DNS, but this is a regular way of DNS poisoning attack. TOP. Do you all know? Have heard about TOP? This is a web tool. Type top.nic.br, get into your browser, and you'll be able to carry out some interesting tests, such as the website test, where you may check your domain as well as your email, and then you run another test. Your company's website, the site that you use to talk to your customers, it has to be configured properly to avoid a number of security issues. Regarding emails, today we have a number of phishing problems, and you are able to guarantee that, technically speaking, the email is not sent by a server which is not the authorized one. You may also test your internet connection to check if your customer is navigating well with IPv6, which is the purple one, and if the recursive is with a validated DNSSEC. So you may have top certificates or stamps for site, email, and manners. So if you register yourself within manners and kindness, and if you get 100% score within top, you're able to get those stamps, and that will differentiate yourself in the market as you're going to have them displayed in your website. I would love to talk to any carrier who are present here today to undergo a call where we may analyze the AS in face of best practices. There is even a podcast which addresses all the internet infrastructure issues. This program is supported by the Association of Providers, and I am at your disposal for further contact information during the event, afterwards, or even for that specific call, and then we can keep talking. That's it. I still have 2 minutes left. If you'd like to ask me any questions, feel free. Thank you. So, as I said, I'll be around. We can keep on talking. and even go into more details about your internet network. Our goal is to improve internet as much as possible, especially as to DDoS attacks and so on. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Gilberto. We insist and insist on providers to get even more concerned about DDoS attacks. This is of great concern in our field, and I know that you don't like very much this type of presentation because it does not solve the problem of someone who's been attacked at the time. But if we don't do that, attacks will be more and more frequent, and we want to mitigate them as much as possible. Preventive actions are the ones that will solve our issues in a middle to long run. That's why it's important to count on everyone's participation. Next, I'd like to hand over to Julio Sirota, to whom I will share the presentation with. He will address the first part of the presentation, analyzing OpenCDN and IX.br traffic analysis. You have the floor. Thank you, Moreiras. My goal here today is to go into details a little bit more about Fortaleza site. And as we have these frequent events being carried out here in the city of Fortaleza, where I would like to go through Fortaleza's trajectory. Because once we see an increase on IXP, Internet Exchange Point of Traffic, usually in the IX website, there are all the sites, informations, but sometimes we don't quite know exactly how we got there and how slow that can be. It is a step-by-step that will help us to build up a IXP infrastructure. This is not my presentation, that's Moreira's. I think it's very timely to share some one side of the information, which is actually the content providers movement migrating to Fortaleza. This is just one side of the traffic exchange point. We have the other side, which are those who consume such a content. So I'm not adding data such as how many ISPs were present, what was the consumption volume, but rather I'll show you the number, the increase in the number of participants, which represents an increase in the number of ISPs which are absorbing the content. You are gonna see how interesting that growth is. We are gonna cover since the very beginning, and we are gonna advance in time. With that, time will get behind and we're going to go really down into the chart. There you go. The whole process starts in 2017, February, when Netflix decides to bring caches to Fortaleza. That was a time when doors have opened for content entrance. That was a first initiative in August 2017. Akamai also they bring their cache to Fortaleza and a new period of growth starts, where the lower traffic comes up. December 2019, Meta and Facebook starts their operation in Fortaleza, where we see a significant leap for traffic, which go through the IX, and 1 year later, July 2020, they upgrade their capacity. We are very close to 500, 550 gigabits of traffic. So this is an illustration in 2022 where we see the graph, and 2017 below we see a movement where we see Facebook entrance, and we see a certain increase in the traffic volume. Now, April 2023, this is a 10 years graph, which does not show the real peak. They do that based on average. Not that we have 2 tera bits of traffic. It's a little bit more considering the way as the graph software works. But we understand, we have at least an idea about the level of growth. I don't remember exactly when it started, but we had some Google caches in Fortaleza. They operate in the AS36040. But that was a first Google's initiative. We have talked to them where they dimension the process, but that is a very long lasting process. Once they deliver the devices and we started operating, all this is not compatible to the Fortaleza IXP, which was probably closing to 2 to 3 terabits of traffic, and caches would produce 200 gigas. And it did not work. Cache had a certain level of inefficiency. Around April 23, we managed to activate a capacity upgrade as you can see there in the graph. In 2024, we see a drop and a plateau. And Meta expands its capacity, both in the IX as well as in their process level. Fortaleza is a place where the demands, they really surprise everyone who gets here. And here we are growing again. Today, the Google caches, they are already operating on their limited capacity. There is a certain expectations of a capacity increase. So I believe that it will take a while. I cannot precise how long it will take, but there will be an additional leap in terms of available traffic in Fortaleza. May 15, 2025, we have reached 6 terabytes per second of peak of traffic. That's quite meaningful. Probably it places Fortaleza as the 10 largest IXPs in the world. So we keep on advancing. Over here we have two informations. We have the bars in blue, which represent the number of IX participants, and the orange line, it is the traffic peak for each one of the months, where we see an increase in the number of participants. That is a gradual growth, but at least that's the way as the traffic grows. It is a rather organic growth. And it's so interesting seeing how much things evolve in the region. Here we have a number of participants since March 2015. So we see that there are 10 years. 10 years ago, we had around 20 participants, and now we are closer to 850 participants. But that is slow and gradual. The IXP, they take long. They keep growing and increases. So it is significant to take a look at this increase in the number of participants, but it's difficult to understand what the limits would be. How far away are we from ideal participants? Number of participants, route table. We might have some indication about that. But I guess that Fortaleza has still lots of room to grow. This is a table that we keep with the history of content providers. This is a table that I presented last year, and in bold, you can see at Cloudflare, Meta, and Faster, they are CDNs, companies that had required a capacity increase to us. And we have a SpaceX here in Fortaleza. So we have experience in São Paulo and Fortaleza to feed their satellite network. Today, the Fortaleza IX, where I introduced to you some current numbers and numbers from August last year, where we have a number of ports, 1 giga, going down from 13 to 10. Today, we no longer supply 1 giga doors. We just work with 10 gigas with the monomode fiber. 10 giga ports, they went down from 202 to 174. That represents a continual movement where we decrease 10 giga ports in the largest IXPs. The 100 gigas, they increased it from 127 to 284 and 44. The ASNs went up from 805 to 838. 33 new AS is connected in Fortaleza during this period of time. And also shared doors, where there is a physical connection. And within that, we transport multiple ASNs, which would be a teleport or a shared port, going up to 715 new connected companies. We have 285 bilateral VLANs configured in Fortaleza IX, and the activated capacity, the ability of all doors of participants. It went up to 26.1 terabits per second. This is a very interesting figure to be followed. So we have a traffic peak of 6 terabits per second, but our installed capacity is 26 terabits. There are large providers in redundant capacity. They also have resilience, and this is an important number that we use it for investments like that. We didn't have any changes in the new peaks in the region, but very soon we are going to have 3 new data centers in the region. We are going to get more participants in operation. And to close and conclude, on April 2025, the aggregated traffic of the 38 locations of IX.br, we have reached 40 terabits per second. This is a nice number. But we didn't plan sending any gift to the participants yet. In comparison to July 2024, 9 months before, we had reached a peak of 37 terabits per second. Why are we comparing to this date when São Paulo had reached 25 terabits per second? April 25, we had a gain of 3 terabits of traffic within those other 37 IXP locations, and São Paulo was still within those 25, which is quite meaningful because we continuously work to try to decrease the concentration of IXP dependence. We know that this is the most connected one with lots of contents, and that is an entry point for new contents and new providers that get to Brazil. And that is great to see that the IXP operation somewhere else is also growing. And one of the main elements that help with that growth is the PCDM project, is the open CDN model, I'm sorry, which Moreiras will present next. And the idea is try to distribute internet with high connectivity all over the country. But São Paulo is a little bit jealous. Why have you abandoned me in April? And they decided in July to get those 26 terabits. And then the aggregated of our participants, they have reached 41 terabits. São Paulo keeps on growing. It grows slowly, where we see exchange of participants, and that is a continuous process which is sustained, which grows. Every 2 months, we get contact from large companies which are getting connected to Brazil, which is one of the objectives of my work, to have an efficiency internet with the high resilience. Let me remind you that in December, we are going to have the National IX Forum, which will be held in São Paulo. That's going to be December 17 and 18 at Rebouças Convention Center in São Paulo. That is an event which is part of the infrastructure week promoted by IX.br and CGI.br, and they will also include a number of meetings, GTER, GTS, and the BCOP Forum that will be translated by the web with simultaneous interpretation in English and Spanish. And if you are not able to make, please join us remotely. So that's it from my side. Let's wait for Moreiras, and if you have any questions, we can answer all of them by the end. Thank you. Okay, let's keep going. This is a slide which covers the current IXP situation in Fortaleza. It is based on a route server table with scripts. It may be a AS path in the router table. I'm just emphasizing the ASs which are present, originating or advertising prefixes. There are some which are originated by third parts, people who are not directly in the IX, and then they are advertised by participants. They are prefixes which are done. That blue spot, blue dot in the middle. You may even download the presentation or follow the link in my presentation where you'll be able to see.
Vocês vão conseguir, pessoal, por favor, pode dar uma olhada aí que entrou uma outra apresentação no lugar da que estava, do nada. Vocês baixarem a apresentação no site, vocês vão conseguir acessar o link.
You'll be able to access the link, but you can have an idea. Take a look, please. The big blue dot is representing IX Fortaleza. Then there are several small dots around them. You can see yellow, greenish, and reddish dots. The green ones are the autonomous systems which are directly present in the IX Fortaleza, advertising just their own prefixes, their IP addresses. The yellow ones are guys who are in the Fortaleza IX, and in addition to the IPs, they are relating that to third parts, traffic customers, or any other type of customers agreements that they might have. We have 328 which are stubs. So this is a balanced number. All these red dots, they represent autonomous systems which are not within the BR registrations. They have autonomous systems which come from abroad. So these are the scripts that they didn't find in the BR registration. They are a total of 29 different ASs in Fortaleza, announcing third-party prefixes. And I do not make such a distinction. Julio was talking about growth possibilities. And down here we see some blue dots. What are they? I have plotted in this map autonomous systems where we see their prefixes on IX Fortaleza, but they are on a... You have two colors, a darker blue and a lighter blue. The darker blue is 80 kilometers away from IX Fortaleza, and the lighter blue 200 kilometers away from IX Fortaleza. So the blue clouds that you see in the lower parts of the slide, they represent a number of autonomous systems which are not quite within the IXP. There are prefixes where they are behind someone in the IXP, but they're very close to Fortaleza. They are 200 kilometers away from Fortaleza. And that is a reasonable number. 200 kilometers from Fortaleza, there are 284 autonomous systems based on the AS headquarters address. Out of those 284, how many of them we see their prefixes in the IXP? 100%. The 284 AS is closer to Fortaleza. Their prefixes are within the IXP of Fortaleza.
But only 150 are there directly. The others are behind someone, behind several networks. If you access the graph, you can hover your mouse and see networks announcing ASAs or look at the looking glass. This is all public data that is there in the looking glass, there in Alice, the PTT's looking glass. Anyway, so just there we have a huge opportunity for growth for the Fortaleza PTT. But why is it interesting to be directly in the Fortaleza PTT? I'm already behind, being announced here in Layer 3, right? Not Layer 3. Sorry, Layer. Gosh, now I got confused. We're here in front, we get nervous, right? While you're just introducing the others, it's fine, but when you start talking, the guys are being announced there in IP, right? IP layer, they're not in layer 2, they're not reaching the PTT directly. So what do we have? Where's the cheat sheet? Just a second. While Julio made the presentation, I'll look at the other numbers. If we look at the state of Ceará, we see 364 autonomous systems registered in the state of Ceará.
And if you take a look at the Northeast region as a whole, because we know really well that Fortaleza's IXP take into account the number of content and networks connected, they go beyond an IXP where it is interesting just performing local exchange traffic. How come those who are closer don't connect directly? If you connect directly, you have a better traffic control. I don't know if you recall Eduardo Barazal's and Pedro's talk addressing possible traffic and control engineering. If you are behind another autonomous system, you cannot do much. That is an autonomous systems which is related to PTT, to IXP, I'm sorry. So it is a good idea to participate actively within the IXP because you have better control. Like shown yesterday, you may prioritize Fortaleza IXP versus São Paulo or any other one that you may be participating at. Fortaleza's IXP has a number of different contents, and that became IXP of international interest. There are autonomous systems outside Brazil, and they represent one of the 10 largest IXPs in the world. Just in the Northeast region, 2,374 autonomous systems just in the Northeast region of the country. So we could have a higher number of autonomous systems connected. What's left? Let's wait and see. Shelf products, other carriers, circuits, get into Fortaleza IXP, better prices, interests, I don't know. You may give your feedback and let us know what are we lacking, or what is the Northeast region lacking of to be able to connect to Fortaleza IXP. Well, that's it. Now let's talk about OpenCDN. OpenCDN, if you still don't know, That is our project where we share infrastructure, and that has to do with CDN, Open CDN. It is open in a sense that any CDN may participate if they feel like those IXPs where this initiative is taken, any IXP participant may comply with. But that is not a CDN project where we are not implementing a CDN, but just implementing an autonomous system with the infrastructure sharing with a data center shared and the infrastructure of IP traffic to feed shared CDNs. And they are invited to place their caches in their infrastructure, and that is open to participants who would like to comply within that at the IXP. We started our pilot project in 2018, and Google, Netflix, Microsoft, and Asian, they decided to place their caches. And then we tell, well, the amount that we pay for a data center plus what we spend with transportation and IP traffic, how much? Do you recall that information, Rodrigo? Please. 1 BRL per megabit per second. I don't remember exactly. 80 cents. Salvador is 80 cents 1 mega. And participants, plus CDN, and then they renegotiate data center links. Today is 80 cents for those who would like to participate and access Asian, Google, Microsoft, Netflix, and global content. You will help us to cover the costs of the projects. And the same applies to Manaus, Brasilia, Recife, and Belo Horizonte. In some places, we have collaborations, sponsorship or partnership with some companies that grant us infrastructure. RNP all over the country is collaborating to that initiative where they offer data centers or backup links. Serpro offered their data center in Brasilia, where we host with them. Also, the Bimol store chains, they also offer us their data center in Manaus, where we host our content with cost zero. And they offer a certain quantity of São Paulo transportation. Also, Sempre from Belo Horizonte, Sempre Internet in Belo Horizonte, they offer transportation to São Paulo as well as Telecom from Recife. So Belo Horizonte and Recife, we have our costs close to zero, and that cost is not charged from our participants. So far, that is opened in the ATM of IXP. That is a multilateral agreement. That's it. This is what we have today. Here, an aggregation of Open CDN traffic, which is close to 600 gigabits per second, summing up the traffic of all Open CDNs at all sites where we have presence. This chart shows the evolution in number of participants in the IXPs from different IX.br sites. I just removed São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Porto Alegre, and because otherwise that would be out of scale. All others, they are designed but not identified. And I had identified on purpose the sites where there is an open CDN. So 3 locations They are highlighted here. I cannot precise 100% that OpenCDN is the only factor which drives us to a success or to an increased number of participants. But in fact, that was one of the collaborated factors, both Salvador, Brasilia, and Recife, to increase the number of participants to add attraction. So one of the goals of OpenCDN is to turn IXPs more attractive and content being closer to users and providers. Manaus did not have such meaningful growth, as that is an isolated city. Almost all ASs from the region, they are in the IXP, and there is no more room for growth. Unless they create new ASs, there is room for improvement, but not so significant. Belo Horizonte, I cannot really tell you why we have or don't have a significant development. Maybe your feedback would be mostly welcome, especially if you have some opinions during the Q&A session, as that is one of the cities where we have several CDNs, Google, Netflix, Microsoft, CDN TV. We even have enough traffic with some level of attraction in Belo Horizonte, but that is not yet reflected in numbers, not as we see at other places. We believe that content, CDNs, and content application providers, they should be installed in a distributed manner all over the national territory, where they could make use of the 38 PPTs of IX.br. We could take such an initiative to all IXPs which are not very attractive directly to CDNs. They should be working by themselves or part of an initiative such as OpenCDN in all IXPs. So little by little, we are able to expand the initiative with this mean. We have 2 places that will get implemented. They are Belém and Campo Grande, and the state of Mato Grosso do Sul. Belém is a little bit more advanced. We have all contracts already signed up. And there are 3 other sites which will be satellite locations of existing sites, where we are going to connect the Brazilian OpenCDN to Goiânia. The OpenCDN which is hosted in Brasilia will also be a participant of Goiânia IXP. The one in Goiânia, which is hosted on a data center in Salvador, will be a participant of Feira de Santana. The OpenCDN, which is hosted in Recife, will be also a participant of Caruaru's IXPs. Then there is a transportation link agreement which will influence on the cost of all the satellite locations, as we may call them. Well, this is a new model. We have some new sites to be opened in the next weeks or months. Very soon, we are going to get some news about that in the website. So that's it about OpenCDN. Let me just benefit from the opportunity to let you know that very soon we are going to start tests of a new portal, My IX.br, with a different layout. We hope that that will improve the queries, calls, and interactions. In the next week, we might send to some selected users, some people who interact with us, and some technicians, which we have a consultant and technicians, that will run a first test. Then we might open to a greater share of our community for troubleshooting, suggestions, and we might migrate everyone very soon. What is going to be different? Well, some extra informations and integrations of other systems such as the IX.br status, the looking glass payment systems, contract signature, if the person has any contract pending that will be present, if there is any problem in the IX.br status that will appear about the chosen site by the participant. But that's not the most important of all. The most important is that you'll be able to visualize the interface. The letters are small, but once you download the presentation, you'll be able to visualize all your portals and the resources. Well, I have a portal, and this is a screenshot of the OpenCDN connectivity in the IXP of Manaus. And then we have a bemol service of ATM and some bilateral VLANs. All of that will be listed on the interface. Today, we don't have that view of the IXP resources. And to open the call, you are going to open the call within the resource itself. I have to expand that door. So you're going to click there and there will be an option to expand the door or another troubleshoot problem, migration, or so on and so forth, which will be helpful for the new calls. You're going to have a call interaction where you'll be able to interact with us throughout the portal as you already do it today. In addition, you'll get a list of all users which are connected to your AS. Today, you don't have this overview in your portal. The first vision has got this functionality to remove and replace users, but very soon that will be possible. That's it. These are the home take messages that I'd like to send to you. Julio, let's get back to the questions. We still have 5 minutes left for Q&A. Actually, 4 minutes.
Bom, meu nome é Daniel. A pergunta
My name is Daniel. How IX sees the large APM players who are changing or leaving, and to small providers that is more complicated. They have to keep smaller teams to keep this level of peering insertion with a number of participants, making their systems more complex. Do you have any initiative in mind to improve that internet exchange? Good morning. My name is Alan from Teresina. When do you expect to take OpenCDN to Teresina City? Well, answering your second question, no, we don't have any forecast for Teresina, although this is our desire. Would like to take that all over the country. I will answer the first question. As to the decisions that each autonomous systems take as to internet exchange, we cannot tell them don't do this or do that. We try to explain.
Não nos parece uma boa estratégia.
and shared that it doesn't seem to be a good strategy. So the decision is up to each autonomous systems. They are not, the most recent case, which is Google, they are not leaving ATM. Those who today do peering with them and they have a traffic smaller than 10 gigabits per second, they may use it without any problem. Those who will ask for a new connection of peerings will not be able to do it just via some certified companies. We do not agree. We have been talking with them. We are trying to change that situation, but we have to go slowly. If it does not work, I guess there is a possibility that within a time they might revise it. Probably they got that decision globally, but Brazil is a different case regarding internet. You don't find anywhere else autonomous systems as the ones we have in operation in this country. So it might be that to Brazil they'll have to redesign. Good morning, I am Roberto Cavalcante. I represent AS Provnet. We are present in IX Fortaleza since the very beginning, and I would like to tell our partners that use IX.br. I am not quite sure about this rule, which should be an IX project, where Brazil with continental dimensions, the AS which will connect it to IX.br, first connected to a close IXP, which is closer to them in the same city or state. But similarly, if we set too many rules to the internet, we end up causing more problems. But the Brazilian reality as to the maturity of ASs, a project can just grow or to add content. I remember when I was trying to convince people to go to PTT, but there is no content. We are just going to have content if we have enough ASs. It's useless to have content and ASs if you are not connected, if other partners are not doing that to content players to get interest into that. So it would be a good idea if we would have a CDN all over. That's how internet should work.
Os sistemas autônomos. E a pergunta seria o seguinte: o IX.br ele pensa projeto PTT em algum tipo de incentivo em divulgar mais a importância de você estar conectado ao máximo de.
So the importance to be connected to a largest number of IXPs. Is that the idea? We have one last question. Please be brief. Our time is up. Hello, I am from Telecom, and I have a question about Open DNS. Our connection is allocated within the IX Fortaleza. As we have this BR digital connection with you guys, do we need to have another connection for PDCN, Open CDN, I mean, or with the type of connection we have, that is enough? Open CDN is not yet available in Fortaleza. Open CDN is in Salvador, Manaus, Brasília, Recife, and Belo Horizonte, which are smaller IXPs. The Fortaleza IXP has a large amount of CDNs and content providers and applications directly participating at the IXP. So the Fortaleza IXP Internet Exchange provider is one of the largest in the world, and they do not need any incentive projects. They come by themselves. But if your question was as to Salvador IXP or Manaus IXP or Recife, where the OpenCDN is, the same connection that you are using to participate into IXP, you also participate in the OpenCDNs, but just where OpenCDN is available, which are within those 5 cities. Very soon we are going to improve it to Belém, Feira de Santana, Caruaru, and Goiânia as well.
Questão aí que o Roberto colocou, eu acho assim,
regarding the last question, the project of IXP Metro and IX.br actions, they are very open and transparent. We allow the autonomous systems to make their own decisions. It's not mandatory. Conversely, NIC has a number of actions like IX Forum Fortaleza. We have a number of regional forums. We have a number of activities that Moreira's teams is responsible to organize all over the country, where we promote our technologies, advantages, the importance to be on the local IXPs. But that is not mandatory. It is somewhat a community desire to allow connectivity. Anything else to add? No, that's it. Well done. So we are going to close this activity right now. And I would like next to invite Gustavo Calau to address his talk, obvious clues or not, to all network providers. Gustavo gave this talk in São Paulo last year during the BICOP seminar, and it was such an amazing talk, and we decided to invite him again to give this talk.
Cadê? Bom, o nome já está aí, né? Dicas óbvias ou não para quem trabalha com rede de computadores.
This is my presentation, right? Obvious or not tips for every network professional.
Nenhum conhecimento prévio para acompanhar a apresentação, então
you won't
se você não é
need
técnico,
any
se você não tem
previous
conhecimento
knowledge
técnico,
for
talvez
following my
você consiga
presentation.
acompanhar a apresentação
So
aqui sem problema
even
nenhum.
if you're not a technician, and even if you don't have any baseline knowledge, you'll be able to follow my presentation. So I'm Gustavo Calau.
A resolução aqui.
I think we have too much of enhancement of the resolution.
Beleza, obrigado. Problemas que acontecem, né? Meu nome é Gustavo Calau.
So I'm Gustavo
Agradecer ao
Calau.
pessoal do NIC. Acho
I'd
que
like
eu
to
não sou muito
start
de
by
site de Belo Horizonte,
thanking
né? Os
IX.br
dois eventos que eu participei
for the
presencialmente do
invitation.
NIC foram os
I
fóruns
don't
regionais lá de
leave
BH, que
Belo
estava do lado.
Horizonte that much.
Eles me convidaram, eu fui lá.
My previous
E
participations took
ano
place
passado eu
in
fui em
Belo
São
Horizonte.
Paulo, e esse ano eu
And
tô aqui,
last
já
year
participei
I
de alguns
actually
eventos online
went
com eles
to
também,
São
do
Paulo.
podcast Camada 8,
And
e
last
só
year I
agradecer.
also took part in
Sempre que eu venho
some
nos eventos
online
presenciais,
events
né? É engraçado
and
porque
also
eu
of
encontro
a
alunos
podcast.
daqui,
And it's really
os
great
caras vêm pedir
whenever
para tirar
I
foto,
come
né?
and
E é
talk, I
muito,
meet some of my
fico com
students.
vergonha, né?
They
Não sei
ask
porque que a galera
to take
tirar foto
pictures
comigo,
with
mas enfim.
me. It's a kind of,
Sou
I
formado
feel
em sistema de
embarrassed.
informação, tenho
Well,
pós-graduação em rede,
but
pós-graduação
anyway,
em
I
gestão de
have
TI
a
utilizando software
graduate
livre.
degree
Trabalhei
also
durante 11
in
anos numa empresa
IT
pública de Belo
management
Horizonte, era
using
concursado.
free software.
E como a
For
rede
11 years,
Enterprise,
I
mas era
worked
uma
at
rede
a
metropolitana, né?
government
Trabalhei com
agency,
protocolos. A gente começou
and
lá com
I
uma rede
have
puramente
worked
L2.
also with a
E eu saí de
metropolitan
lá, a gente estava com uma
network.
rede já
We
colocando ali
started
MPLS, com
with
caixas com MPLS e
a
tudo mais. Então
network
foi
that
muito
was
legal
just an
trabalhar, né,
L2
numa rede
network,
puramente
but
L2
it was
e ter essa
really
evolução
nice
aí num período
to
de
have
uma
had that
década, né? Então
experience.
participei de
And
todos os
I stayed
processos
there
ali.
for a
Tinha lá mais
decade.
de 1.000 quilômetros de fibra própria, né? 2 data centers, né? 4
Imagine we
BGP
had
full
2
route chegando, a
data
gente era um AS.
centers,
Então,
we
apesar
were
de não
an
ter essa
AS, we
vivência de
had
provedor, que
also
a maioria
4
aqui tem, eu trabalhei numa
in
rede
B2B,
relativamente complexa, né?
and I
Eu
worked
também lecionei
for a
durante
very
8
complex
anos instituição
network.
de ensino superior lá em Belo Horizonte.
I
Em
also,
2015, eu criei
I
um
was
canal no
also a
YouTube. Quando eu comecei a
professor,
lecionar ali,
and
um ano
then
depois, eu criei
in
um canal no YouTube.
2015, I
Hoje eu conto já
started
com
my
mais de 80 mil
YouTube channel.
inscritos, né?
And
Tem muitos
today I
vídeos
have
lá,
more than
e 3 milhões de
80,000
visualizações.
subscribers,
Então, o meu foco normalmente é quem está
many
começando na área,
videos,
né?
and more
Então, a
than
galera que está
3
entrando no mercado de
million
trabalho
views.
hoje, provavelmente
So
já assistiu
for
algum
those
vídeo
of you
meu.
who are just
Isso é
starting
muito
in
legal,
this
assustador
business,
talvez.
you have probably seen one
E
of
desde
my videos,
2016,
which is kind of
eu tenho uma
scary.
plataforma de treinamento.
But
E sempre bem ali,
then in
bem artesanal
2016,
ali.
I
Hoje,
started
né,
a
já está
training platform.
mais bonitinho ali e tudo mais.
Today,
Mas
it's
eu
more
sempre fui o cara de ir
organized.
fazendo ali, a galera foi gostando do
But
conteúdo. E
I
né, as
just
coisas foram dando certo. E atualmente eu só vendo
followed
curso na internet, eu saí de todas
my
os
subscribers
empregos
and
que eu tinha.
followers, and I was always
E
improving.
trabalho só
Then
com
I
isso,
started
né? Eu não trabalho
providing
mais, eu só
training
dou aula, né?
programs
Galera
over the
brinca aí.
internet,
Eu
and
tenho algumas
today,
certificações na área, acho que mais
this is
relevante é o
my
CCIE que
full
eu tirei em
job.
2018.
So today I just teach. I also have some certifications in the area. The
E tem
most
disclaimer
relevant
também que eu
is
coloco por fim dessa
CRR.
apresentação, né?
Another
Que é uma obra de
disclaimer
ficção, qualquer semelhança com nomes,
is
pessoas,
that
fatos ou situações da vida real terá sido
any
mera
similarities
coincidência.
with
Eu não vou
names
citar nomes de
or
nada aqui, mas tem
people,
algumas situações
facts,
aqui de
or
rede enterprise que vocês
situations,
devem
it's
passar
just a
também aí no
mere
provedor.
coincidence. I'm not
E
going to
que
mention
acho que acontece com
names.
todo mundo, se não
And
aconteceu,
I believe that what I'm going to
enfim,
share are
desconsidera, mas
facts
não
that
é
have
recado para
probably
ninguém diretamente.
happened or that you have
São só
already
algumas
experienced.
provocações, né? A dica óbvia
Okay?
número 1, né? Faça a
So,
topologia da sua
first tip,
rede e mantenha sempre atualizada. É uma
run the
dica bem
topology
óbvia,
of your
mas
network and
conversando com o
keep it
pessoal, eu
updated.
achava que
It
isso era um problema
is
somente de rede
pretty
enterprise,
obvious.
mas
And
também
in the
tem muito
past, I
provedor,
thought that this
né,
was just
que
an
não tem o desenho da rede
enterprise
direito, né?
network, but I see that
E
sometimes
aí,
providers do not have
quero dar para cá
a
porque senão vai
proper
passar.
design of their
Eu
network.
peguei aqui um exemplo que normalmente tinha lá no mundo corporativo, né? Você
And
tem um ticket
one
aberto
example
lá,
that
um
comes
chamado
from
aberto,
the corporate
e aí
world.
você
So let's
precisa
say you have
resolver
an
aquele
open
problema.
ticket and you
Eu
need to
trabalhei muito com
solve
operação
that
de rede.
issue.
E
I
aí
have worked a great
você pega a
deal
topologia, o desenho
with
da rede, porque a rede
network
do cliente está
operations.
parada e tudo mais,
And if the
e você
network
precisa
of your
atender, né? Então, né, referente ao ticket,
customer
tarará,
is
a gente
down, you
precisa
need
da topologia
to
da rede, conforme informado,
work,
inclusive
right?
já teve uma
You
call
need to
antes,
go
né?
over
E todo um
the
processo que foi
network
feito ali,
topology.
e você aguarda.
And
E
then
aí,
you wait.
O cliente ele responde, né,
And then
que
your
segue a
customer
topologia em anexo
replies to you,
e ainda
they
cobra de
send you
novo,
the
né, cara, tá
topology,
ruim aqui,
and
tá com
once
desempenho
again they
ruim,
say,
se
well,
puder
the
resolver o quanto
performance
antes,
is
aí você
still
fala, pô, o
very
cara é bom,
poor,
né, tem a topologia
can you
da
help
rede,
me? And then you
tem um
think,
arquivinho
great,
ali,
they have the
topologia
topology,
completa,
they
atualizada.jpg,
have a
e aí quando você
file
abre, né, você fala, pô, agora
saying
as
that
coisas vão
it's a
andar, né,
comprehensive
tá tranquilo.
topology, so you think that now everything will go well. But then you receive this type of design.
Aí o cara manda o cara fez no paintbrush, né, o desenho,
you can see
ou no
this
papel de
is
pão,
a
né?
design
Pô, cara,
that
melhor
was
não ter
created
mandado, né?
very
Tipo,
poorly.
né? O filho dele de 5 anos fez o desenho.
Perhaps
É raro, mas acontece com
his
frequência, né?
5-year-old
O que você vai fazer
son
com um desenho
actually
desse?
draw that.
Nada, né?
What
Você vai ter que fazer do zero.
are you going to
Então,
do
às
with
vezes, você
that?
contrata uma
Nothing, right? You
consultoria,
need
um
to start
profissional
from
ali
scratch.
sênior,
So
ou,
perhaps
né,
you
o cara que é o
hire a
papo ali,
consulting
e
company
você
or a
tá
senior professional.
gastando uma nota, né? Com o cara, a hora do cara é
You are
muito
investing
elevada
a
ali, né?
lot.
Sendo que
You're
ele
paying
vai,
a lot.
boa parte do tempo dele, ele vai
But then most
gastar,
of this
cara, fazendo
professional's
o
time
básico que você deveria
will
ter
be
feito, né? Que é
spent doing
desenhar a
the
rede.
basics which you
Eu
should have
tenho lá no meu
done to
Instagram, eu
have the
coloco,
design
eu
of your
coloco
network.
alguns
On my
memes lá, e eu
Instagram
postei uma
account, I
vez
have some memes,
esse
and
livro, né? Que
once
é
I
Resolvendo
published
Problemas em Redes sem
this
Documentação, né?
book.
E a escassez é a mãe da criatividade, né?
And,
E é uma
well,
piada isso aqui.
scarcity is the
Inteligente é que
mother
nos
of
comentários eu coloco, como é que eu
creativity,
faço para
right?
comprar esse livro?
Sometimes
Como é que
people
eu,
ask
cara,
me,
não
how can I
existe,
buy
sabe? Tipo,
this
é
book?
só
I
uma
say, well,
provocação, é uma piada, né?
this book actually does
Aí tem que
not
explicar, né?
exist. I have to
E aí desenha a
explain.
sua rede, né? É sério, né?
So
Para
please,
mim, na minha opinião, é o
design your
documento mais
network.
importante.
Seriously, this is the most important
Trabalhar, né?
document
Tem uma topologia, como dirigir a
of
200
your
km por
network.
hora
So
de noite, né? Sem o
working
farol.
without apologies,
Eu
just
gostava,
like
na época que eu
driving
trabalhava, né?
very
Não só
fast
dava aula.
at
Eu
night
tinha um quadro
without
branco que ficava atrás da
any
minha mesa.
lights on.
E eu desenhava na mão mesmo, com um pincel ali e tal.
Here you
Ia
can
fazendo as
see how I
utilizações.
used to
É um modo muito arcaico,
design,
eu
to
sei,
come up
né?
with a
Depois a gente
design.
passava isso
This
por uma
is
rede viva,
very
né?
archaic, I know.
Gostava, inclusive, de imprimir
And
no
then
A0 e tudo mais. Eu
we would
fazia os
go
negócios,
to a
tentava fazer
live
mais bonitinho.
network.
Sou um cara
Then I
que
try to
gosto das
improve
coisas
on
muito
what I had
visuais,
done
assim.
at first.
E
I
eu,
am a
às
visual
vezes, sei lá,
person.
sou meio tapado, eu não consigo trabalhar numa rede
And
sem entender realmente
I
como as coisas estão
cannot
conectadas.
really work
Então, eu
on a
gostava de
network
trabalhar
without
assim. E eu acho
understanding
que
how things are
muitos
connected.
dos problemas que a gente consegue resolver entendendo o fluxo
And
básico
to
da sua
me,
rede. Você não precisa
many of the
ser o mega
issues that
papo
we
em
face
MPLS,
can be
BGP,
solved if you
sequência alta, não sei o quê.
understand the
Mas se você
basic
entende o
flow
fluxo
of your
básico do tráfego
network.
da sua rede, né?
So if you
Como é que o
do
pacote
that,
X
how
chega
package
no lugar
X
Y, né?
will
Por que que ele
reach
usa essa
Y?
rota, né? Como é que foi tomada essa
Why
decisão?
is this
Quais são os protocolos
routing being
envolvidos, né?
used? Which
Isso
are
está
the
certo?
protocols
Então, se você é um
involved?
profissional
Is
que está
this
chegando ali na empresa
right?
agora,
So
ou
if
é um
you
júnior, é um
are
técnico,
starting at a
cara,
company, or if you
seja
are a
curioso,
junior
né?
professional,
Pega ali no
be
seu computador, pega o
curious.
default do seu computador. Como é que ele
Just
chega no gateway? Quem é o gateway da sua rede, né? Depois disso, como é que ele parte
get
ali para a
your
internet? Quem está resolvendo o
computer, your
nome, né?
PC, and
Então,
which
parecem coisas
is
básicas, mas para quem
your
está começando, isso é
computer
muito
gateway?
importante, né?
How does
Porque
it get to the
você começa
gateway?
realmente a
And
entender
that's
como as coisas
how you
funcionam.
start
E se
to
você
really
entende como as coisas
understand how
funcionam, né, na
things
hora que dá
work.
problema,
And if you
você
know
tende a
that,
resolver mais rápido, né?
it's
E como você
easier
desenha a
and
topologia da melhor
faster for you
forma,
to
né?
solve
Com a
an
mão,
issue.
não tem outro,
And also,
né? Tem
what's the
ferramentas
best way for
milagrosas
you to
de
come up with
desenho
a
automático. Eu,
topology?
particularmente, eu nunca
Do
gostei
it
dessas
by
ferramentas
hand,
porque
right? There are
eu
some
passava
tools
mais tempo
available, but I
revisando a
don't like
topologia
them, to tell you the
do
truth,
que eu
because I
poderia
would
gastar
have
fazendo a topologia de
to
fato.
spend a
Então,
lot of time
a gente lá
reviewing everything.
na empresa pública, né, muito software livre,
So at
eu sempre usei
the
Linux, e aí eu usava o
government
dia, que é como se fosse um
agency I
Corel
used to
Draw,
work for, we
de
used
vetor ali, né, vetorização de
Linux.
desenho ali, e eu
And I
fazia no
also
dia.
used the
Dá trabalho,
IA,
mas eu
which
gostava.
is similar
A
to
galera
Corel
nova aí que tá
Draw.
chegando, né, gosta muito do
But now,
Draw.io, que é uma ferramenta
youngsters, they really
em nuvem, né?
enjoy
Eu
using a
nunca achei muita
cloud
graça. Tem
tool.
gente que faz no
I
PowerPoint,
don't
tem gente
like
que
it
faz no
that
Visio, né?
much, but
No
it's
Visio
a
é legal que tem
Draw.io.
aqueles extensos,
Some
né, que
people
você
also
pode
use
baixar
Visio,
com um
and
íconezinho
which is
bonitinho ali
great.
do fabricante.
You have a nice
Só que eu sou
icon
tão
from
chato
the
que eu mesmo
manufacturer,
faço os meus
but
ícones, né?
I'd
Mas isso
rather
aí já é outra história, né?
develop
Você
my
pode fazer do
own
jeito que você quiser.
icons. You can
Desde que
do
tenha um
it
desenho
any way
atualizado,
you
bonitinho,
want, as
definido, né?
long as you
Tem
have
protocolos
an
que podem te
updated
ajudar, né?
design.
SDP e LDP.
Some protocols that
Então eu
can
tenho aqui, por
help you are
exemplo, né, o Switch
CDP
1,
and
Switch 2 e o R10
LLDP.
ali.
So here I have
Eu
switch
tenho esse
1,
desenho, como é
switch
que,
2,
se eu
and
não vejo
R10.
isso, né? Eu não
So
consigo ver,
if
tá
I
lá no meu
cannot
terminal.
see
Como é que eu
that, if I
faço
am at
para
my
descobrir
terminal
essa
and if I
topologia?
don't see that,
Se eu
what
tenho
can I do
ferramentas
in
de
order to
descoberta de camada
learn
2, como o
how
CDP ou
this
LLDP,
topology
eu dou um
looks like?
comando ali
Well,
no
if I
equipamento, se os
have
equipamentos estão falando esse
layer 2
protocolo,
tool,
eu consigo
CDT
ver que o
or
Switch 2, por
CDP
exemplo,
or
né? Eu estou dando um show
LLDP,
DP Neighbors, um show
you
LDP
just give
Neighbors.
a
Eu
command
consigo
And that to allow you to see that switch 1 is connected to switch 2 and also R10. You can see the local and remote doors. And from that, you start drawing. Nothing new. And because it's a layer 2 protocol, all the layer 1 elements will be hidden. You will not be able to see them.
ambientes mais
So
legados também tinha muito conversor de fibra, ou até mesmo
also in
hubs lá.
legacy events or
Esses
corporate
elementos vão estar
environments, you have a
escondidos
fiber
porque é um protocolo de camada
converter,
2.
and
E
they
aí,
will be
para você
hidden.
continuar descobrindo, mesmo que você
So
não
in
tenha esses
order for you
protocolos,
to find out
você pode usar a tabela MAC do equipamento,
more,
né?
you
Dar um
can
ping ali,
also
ver onde o
use
MAC está sendo
the
aprendido.
MAC
E por último, que é o pior
table
de todos,
of
que é
your
bater cabo, né?
equipment or
Você vai
give
ter
a
que ir lá no
ping,
rack, aquele rack
or you
bonito, né?
will
Organizado,
have to
penteado,
go over the
tranquilão de
rack
mexer.
and the wires.
Tem uma técnica também legal, que é você dar shutdown na porta,
Very
né?
nice
Aí
technique
quando você dá shutdown na porta,
in
alguém vai
which you
gritar,
shut
pô, tá
down a
chegando
door.
lá,
And
então deixa
once
eu
you
ligar essa
do
porta. Não
that,
recomendo, né?
somebody is gonna
Mas às
complain,
vezes
and
funciona
that's
também.
how you learn,
Então
right?
essa é a
Although
primeira
this is
dica.
not the
A
best
segunda
technique.
dica, né?
Well,
Isso
my
muito para quem
second
está
tip,
começando,
especially for
é
those of
dominar os
you who
fundamentos
are
de rede, né?
starting, just
Porque
master
a gente fala,
the
né, tem apresentações
basics.
aqui falando de segment routing,
So
V6,
sometimes or here we
IPv6,
have heard presentations about
protocolos
segment
puramente
routing, V6,
baseados ali num backbone, né, com uma estrutura
protocols that are
mais nova e tudo
based
mais.
on
Só que para quem está começando na
newer
área,
backbones. But if you're just starting,
se ele pular etapas ali, né,
if you skip a
como eu
step,
pego muito esses estudantes que estão iniciando aí,
and I work
eles às
with
vezes não
many
querem,
people who
né?
are
Você
just
vai
starting.
ensinar ali no primeiro período da faculdade modelose,
So
TCP/IP, o cara não quer, o
the
cara quer sentar
first
no
year
terminal ali,
of
socar comando no
college,
dispositivo e
you
é isso aí,
will
quero ver o
talk
negócio funcionando
about,
ali.
right,
Não tá
TCP,
errado, porque é a parte mais
IP.
legal mesmo, mas, né?
We're
Tem um
not
livro que
talking
eu gosto
about
bastante,
the
que é esse
most
High Performance
amazing
Browser
things.
Networking.
I
Inclusive é um
really
livro que
enjoyed
está
this
disponibilizado
book,
aí na
High
internet de forma
Performance
gratuita pelo autor.
Browser
Tá
Networking,
não
and
tem
it's free
tradução,
of
né? Mas
charge.
enfim.
It is
E
not
tem uma frase lá que ele
translated into
coloca, um parágrafo, na
Portuguese,
verdade,
but there is
que é
a
muito legal,
paragraph
que eu sempre
that
coloco nas minhas
they
apresentações, né, para
mention
os
and that
alunos aí,
I always
que
like to
é difícil
quote.
equilibrar o estudo
It's
dos
hard to
fundamentos da trilha de
balance the
tecnologia
study
com a
of the
necessidade de
basics,
acompanhar as
considering
últimas
technology,
inovações.
with the need to
No
follow
entanto,
the
se não
latest
entendermos os
innovations.
fundamentos, nosso
However, if we
conhecimento
don't
é
know the
oco,
basics, our
superficial.
knowledge is
Saber como
just
usar as
superficial.
camadas mais
To
altas da
know
pilha de
how to
tecnologia não é
use the
suficiente.
higher
Quando
levels
problemas
of the
complexos
technology
precisam
pile
ser
is not enough.
resolvidos, quando o
Whenever
inexplicável
complex issues
acontece,
need to
a
be solved,
pessoa
when the
que entende os fundamentos
inexplicable
libera o
happens,
caminho.
the person who
Então, aquele problema
understands the
que você não está
basics will
sabendo
lead
como é,
the way.
né?
So
Tem um espírito lá
if
na
you
rede, você não sabe
face
como é
a
que resolve.
challenge that you don't know how to
Cara,
solve,
muito
first of
provavelmente tem
all,
alguma coisa ali que
it's
você está deixando
very
passar,
likely
que é
that you are
básico, né? Depois você
overseeing
descobre, né?
something
Depois do leão morto,
basic.
todo mundo é caçador, mas
And then
tem
I
muita
know
coisa
once you
que
find
está
it,
atrapalhando o desempenho da
everybody
sua
will
rede
see that, right?
e
But
poderia ser resolvido
there are
com
many
práticas que
things
são
that can be solved
fundamentais, né?
by
Desde
applying
diminuir domínio de broadcast com
basic
VLAN, por exemplo, né?
practices,
São coisas fundamentais e
right?
muita
For
gente
example,
não faz, né?
how
Então,
to
para quem está
use a
começando na área,
VLAN, for
né?
example. So for those of you just
E quer
starting,
continuar na área,
and
né?
if you want to keep on working
Se você
in
conseguir
this
responder
field,
essas perguntas,
if
né,
you're able to
que eu
answer
elaborei
these
aqui, talvez
questions,
você
and I
tenha
have
os
the questions
fundamentos
listed here,
básicos de rede, né, de
you
forma
will
sólida, né? Primeira
master
pergunta,
the
né, como é que o switch popula
basics.
a tabela MAC?
First
Segunda, né,
question,
como é que ele
how
escolhe a
do
onde enviar o
they
frame? Para isso
choose
tem que ter uma
to
porta pública,
where
uma porta
send
aberta.
the frame?
Quatro, o que é uma
What
unknown unicast flow?
is
Cinco, como é
the
que acontece o loop de
unknown
camada 2?
unicast flow
Três, por
in
que que é Ethernet?
5? How about the
Dominância
layer
IP, né,
2
one,
loop?
one.
Why is
7, como que o
Ethernet so
roteador escolhe a melhor
dominant
rota?
nowadays?
8,
How
que tipo de
router will
protocolo,
choose
né?
the best
Como ele
route?
analisa o
And
pacote,
how do they analyze
por que
the
ele analisa o
package?
pacote e não o frame, né?
And why not the
Por que que ele
frame and
reescreve,
rather
deixa
the
ele rewrite?
package?
Isso é
Why do
complexo,
they
né?
rewrite
10,
on
por
the
que que o modelo
frame?
tinha assim foi
How come
quebrado? Por
the
que que as
end-to-end
greves
model was
utilizar
broken?
IPv6?
Why do we have to
12,
use
como é que acontece o loop de camada
IPv6?
3?
How
Né?
about
Para
the
que que
loop
existe
of
ARP
layer
no
3?
IPv4 e
Why do
IP
we
no
have
IPv6?
ARP for
Qual que é a diferença de
IPv4
UDP para
and
TCP?
DP in
Como que eu consigo, né,
IPv6?
navegar na
What
internet
is the
usando o
difference of
decodificador, né? Me explica o
LDP
passo a
to
passo.
TCP? How
Inclusive,
may
tem
I
um vídeo que eu
navigate
pedi
on the
alunos
web
que,
using my
como eu
PC?
posto muita coisa na
Explain me
internet lá,
step by step.
que
As
recrutadores que,
I
né,
post a lot
parte
in the
de entrevista
internet,
técnica,
we have
utilizavam
recruiters that during the
laboratórios de workshop
technical
meu,
interview, they
iniciantes ali
use the
para
workshop labs
colocar para o candidato ali para ele
as
resolver.
beginners
Então,
to
são
try to
coisas
solve
que
them.
acho que todo profissional deveria saber.
So any
Uma outra coisa que
providers,
pode
they
ser uma
should
pergunta
know
boba e tudo
about
mais,
that.
mas é tipo escolinha de futebol, né?
It's
São
like football school. When you learn the baseline, you have to learn the basic factors. If you are concerned about your baseline today, in the future, you have a great likelihood to become a better provider. And now, hint number 3. Are there any type of managing changes? Well, that can be quite common, but talking to some colleagues, there are providers who haven't got that. You might be working and then someone says, has the internet gone down? And usually the person who asks is exactly the one that puts the internet down. I have done that before, but my internet was very small. There was someone yesterday here saying that they dropped cities, the whole city. If you give several commands to do whatever, if you do that freely, you may bump into trouble. Once someone asked me a question over Instagram, how do I do this or that? I answered him back, and then I said, don't do that during the production time. And you know, imagine if that guy, an unknown person at Instagram that would put the whole network down. That was a big risk. We are very confident. We believe that there won't be any problem, and then you enter, then your console gets interrupted and locked. So we have information technology library, which is very mature, and there are changes that can be done during a certain process, but usually you are going to do that outside the production time at different shifts. Because if it goes down, the impact will be reduced. There are many people here who probably do not follow that, despite sounding obvious. So how to do it, what to do, what are the risks of doing or not doing? Is that boring, designing that document? Yes, it is, because it takes hours to design your RDN. Sometimes takes longer than an effective change. But anyhow, that is required to guarantee the internet health. In case that is approved, who will execute is the one who had suggested the change naturally. And number 4, today, to have a lab test homologation environment, which is highly used in softwares, but not so much in more complex networks. And that's not so difficult as it used to be a while ago. When I started studying internet network, we would follow the foreigners' forums, and we would look at the foreigners' lab, which was better than my own network, but it was so expensive acquiring an equipment like that. But back in 2005, we finally got some sort of simulators since its installations, which was the Cisco Package 3, despite being a limited tool for beginners, yet it has a very low entrance barrier. And in 2007, we see a real evolution. I don't know if you remember that or not, but we had the DynaMIPS, DynaJane, DynaMIPS, which would help us to simulate a network hardware, the Cisco 1700 to 7200, with a real operational system. With a non-graphic approach, you would follow configuration files and upload the network. There was no graphic interface. But it was amazing. It had changed our lives at that time. Those who didn't live 2005, it's difficult to explain how hard our access was before that. GNS3, which is a simulator and emulator, now with the graphic interface of a Dynamics, fantastic. And then there was another evolution, which was UMAC Lab, where we have a model of a GS3, but it was AVN. It still is AVN, and now you are able to emulate switches with over Linux iOS. Now at least you are able to emulate switches. A little while later, we got Eve, which is a UNetLab fork. It's just an improved one, but we are able with images, Chemo images, where you may virtualize anything with the X8 architecture, and you are able to do just everything. It runs on the virtualization of the virtualization, and the limit is the number of memory and what you have in your device. But you can do quite a lot. Then the Penet Lab, which is a fork of Eve Pro, which is the paid version they had forced on a fork. The Eve owners, they don't like the type of forced fork anyhow. In less than 15 years, we started from zero, and now we are able to emulate just anything. Last year, they told me about Container Lab, which was somewhat new to me. I tested Container Lab, and that was released by Nokia's engineers to Nokia. They have an open norm. Anyone can do a fork as long as you have Nokia copyrights, and it works with containers. So the cost to upload, it's very low and easy. You install it at Linux, you may install at Microsoft. That's possible. Everything is really well documented in their website, and they work with YAML files, and now you may scratch and upload the lab. Those that would like automation lab using Nokia or any other vendor, you can do that. But if you are gonna follow lab from Nokia, the image is triggered automatically. I'm talking about the device image, and it may also run other devices. And there are several ready-to-go labs for you to run. And a piece of suggestion to company owners, that is not expensive at all. Why don't you have a lab environment for your team to play? And in case there is any sort of change, you have to test it before you do it. Test before you answer your live network if you have an homologation environment for them to see if it's gonna work or not. Every time that I have to update my network or to do something new, let's update a tunneling. Is that gonna work? Yes or no? Well, a part of the emulated network with a basic backbone. And let's see if it's gonna work, if the RDF it's gonna work or not. So we try to decrease the network problems by testing it priorly, which is not so complicated. Number 5, to rule out any not proper adjustment or fix, eliminate unnecessary fixes. If there is someone closer to the double stack, it's because something is happening. He is placing a hanger, a cable that is not going through the proper guides. And then he says, no, that's okay, it's temporary. But whatever is temporary, it is there forever. You start with this temporary fix in 2025. By 2055, that same fix will be there yet. A hanger from one hanger, one rack to another, it's okay. How about two double stacks, one facing the other? You have to jump the cables which are on the way. And here I have another meme from a book. Well, computers networks. Where did you buy it? Where did you buy it? I don't know. So these weird fixes, they take to technical debt, which is highly used to everyone, and it also applies to our network. There is a very nice book about this topic, which is not technical, but that is a novel. And if you haven't read that romance yet, I would suggest you to do it. It's a science fiction, it's a fictitious stories, but it helps a lot. This is what we have now, which is to see everything as being codes, automation, and they replicate that idea very well, especially those beginners into the topic. I would advise you reading this book. And I like to mention a case where I saw they didn't have that available on layer 2. We're talking about workaround. That's exactly what they did. Why they don't have scan able? I had too many spawn tree, and then I decided not to enable it. Well, if you no longer have the protocol, you no longer have the problem. And there were sites that people who were not technical and from other areas, they discovered that by connecting two network points, the internet network would be interrupted. So if he want to go home earlier, 4 p.m., he would close the network loop, the network would be interrupted as there was no availability. If we don't have a well-structured base, we end up managing problems wrongly. So it's not just to enable the protocol, but rather to understand how they work. How can we try to diminish those workarounds thanks to training, awareness, education, best practices, configuration models? Why is automation the new kids on the block due to manual configs, box by box, which leads to a number of mistakes? And number 6, which your network may attack others. Don't let that happen. The DDoS guys, I've never faced a problem like that, but providers, they face problems like that. In my city, we have a 3Y handshake. We have to close the communication. If you say, is that fine? Yes, it is. How about you? I'm fine too. That is how it happens in my hometown. While working at a company in a call center, talking to the technical team from São Paulo, every time that there was a question, I would say why, which is a slang from his hometown. And they copied us and created TCP three-way handshake. For TCP connection, we have a sync ACK, TCP protocol, reliable, and I have to guarantee that the connection is established before I start sending any data. And on a regular communication, on the lower left, we have this blue machine that is going to close the connection, and the 012, and they want to close the connection with a closer server. This package will get to the other side. Everything is working fine. And then they are going to answer with a sync ACK. And how about the operation? In the IP spoofing example, how an attack like that will perform? We have our attacker here and the reference of someone attacking. I'll have to change because there is a new generation who did not see Brazil become a champion in 2002, let alone 1994, so probably we have to change the player to somebody else. So they want to attack someone, and their target will be the server on the right, on the right to the broccolis. That will be their target. So on a simple way, they wake up their guys on a botnet, they infected their machines with some type of malware. There is a command center where the devices will be activated. The client hasn't got any idea about the facts, and connectivity attempt is sent. But the IP origin, which are in the devices, are 920. And the package, though, we see that the target and the IP of origin that is leaving my network 9.2 is with 200.0. What is the goal here? When the broccoli server will answer back to SYNAC, they are going to use IP of origin that will become the IP of destinations. They'll have to ask back to whom have asked him before. So they're going to direct all this traffic to their target. And due to the volume, not because of the volume of quantity of traffic, but the number of small packages that are going to be taken. The resource might not be able to cope and then drop, and the resource will last long.
So it's difficult to treat that. There are some ways of avoiding that your network attacks other networks. So I'm going to mention now URPF. Essentially, this is about avoiding that your network attacks other networks, the spoofed origin IP. Here we have the strict mode. And I'm going to use the Cisco, but other providers have the same thing. So in the strict mode, there are two conditions here that should be accepted or matched so that it considered that this is not spoofed traffic. So there should be a valid entry in the routing table, and also the interface to reach the origin of the package should be the same as in the routing table. So we have the origin IP 10.0.15. First criteria, is there an entry in the table? So the router checks, and if there is a route, it cannot be the default route, otherwise it doesn't make sense. Okay, there's not. So first criteria, check. Let's see the second one, the interface to reach the origin IP of the package. Is it the same one as for receiving? It came through interface 1. The route is pointing towards route 1 or interface 1. Okay, so check. This is legit traffic. Let's look at a non-legit traffic. For the strict mode, First, we have to check the routing table. There's a route for this network. Interface 2. See, this package came through interface 1. So according to the interface criteria, if the origin is the same one as delivery, no, it's pointing towards another interface. So it's going to consider that this is non-legit traffic. For an enterprise network, this mode can be activated, but maybe it's not as clear because you might have some sort of asymmetry in routing, and that might drop traffic. And then this traffic will be discarded. Let's look at what Cisco calls the loose mode. So it looks at the routing table and the route, if it's the default route. So there's a package here, the origin IP 192 something. Is it in the routing table? Yes, it is. So you check for that. Then non-legit traffic, second example here. The IP is completely different and it's not in the routing table. So it's going to discard this traffic. Since this is not in the routing table, this is going to be discarded. So that's how you protect your network from becoming a vector of attacks to other networks, which is extremely important, right? It's not just about not being attacked. Your network should not attack other networks as well. If everyone is concerned with that, we might have less of this type of attack. Now we have 3 minutes left for questions. If you want to follow me online, these are my social media channels. So thank you, and that's it.
Bom dia.
Hello, good morning. First of all, congratulations on your presentation. I admire your work. So out of the tips you have presented just now, when you apply them, which one generates more impact? I know that all of them should be applied. Of course, it takes a while to adopt them, depending on the culture of the company. Is the first one the main one or the most impactful one, maybe? And I wrote my questions here. Just 1 second. Automation today, can it also be something that we should apply? Thank you. Thank you. Well, the design of the network. I used to be a guy that didn't have network design in my network, so I've gone through that myself. And, you know, after you are hit by some blows, you understand that you need to work with that. It's difficult to maintain that for a complex network. It involves many people. But yes, you should do that. And it's the real game changer. People complain that there are problems, you know, that you don't have talent, you don't have people to hire. And yes, it's going to get worse. Networks are more complex and we need more technical labor. How can you train your team if you don't even have a design in your network? How are you going to teach folks about the connections and traffic? Where does it come from? Where does it go? So it's really important to have the whole traffic flow. If you've been working with the network, if you're senior, you know that. You understand it. You understand what's going on. But if you're new to that, I think that the visual approach is very good. Regarding automation, well, you know, there's a lot of talk about automation, but some people have a provider, but it's just L2. It's difficult to follow. When the networks are more mature, that might be the natural evolution. However, as long as we don't have we don't even have the groundwork, so the network working as it should. How can we think of automation? Nothing is working properly in the network, so we cannot leapfrog previous stages before we move to automation. I hope I have answered your question, but that's my opinion anyway.
Gustavo, ainda dá tempo da última pergunta?
Can I ask one last question? Well, you're in the microphone. Go ahead and ask your question. Okay. Gustavo, in the beginning of your presentation, you talked about basic network settings. And I'm seeing some things that are different from what you've mentioned. Whenever there's a demand for consultancy work or when I work with different professionals, what I see is that folks are leapfrogging some steps. People have learned to use some commands, but they didn't do the groundwork. And I know that is changing. In the past, if you needed troubleshooting, you had people that were better prepared to troubleshoot network problems. However, I don't see that today anymore. We have a lack of troubleshooting competent professionals. And I think this is due to the lack of the groundwork. Folks don't really understand what they're doing. And it's always a basic mistake. 99% of mistakes that happen are connected to the groundwork. And sometimes if people leapfrog the groundwork, that's when we have issues. You're an excellent teacher. I like your videos, your posts. You're very clear. I imagine that you see that, people wanting to leapfrog. And what is your opinion on that? Following all the steps before you become a senior engineer. Thank you for the question. Well, I talk to many students who are beginners, of course. And sometimes these folks are concerned with the tutorials, but they don't understand why they do what they do. So they will apply the commands, but they don't really understand why they use those commands. So, when there is a problem, they don't even know what's going on because they just copy paste the commands. As a content provider about the subject, I think I have to retain the attention of these folks so that they find these things interesting. So my slides are funny because I like to be funny, but also because I want to hold these folks' attentions. It's complicated. People don't pay attention for longer than 5 minutes. So it's not that they're not willing to learn, but there's so many competing messages that it's difficult to do that. When I was younger, there were less things going on at the same time. So now the hype is AI. Let's talk about AI. Then it's programming. Let's talk about programming. And then there's another hype and another. They cannot be consistent, younger folks. So if you work with networks, dive deep into networks. If you're a trainee working with networks, focus on that, dedicate to that. Of course, it's going to take a while for you to gain the knowledge. But, this is an area just like any other. There are no miracles. It takes time. And it takes time for everyone, not just for you. Thank you, Gustavo. Let's give him a hand, please.
Vamos agora para último painel da parte da manhã.
And now we're going to have the last panel before we break for lunch. This is a panel about the risks of blocking IPs and URLs. I'll be moderating this panel myself, and I'd like to give the floor to Fernando Frediani from Brazil Peering Forum and Tiago Ayub from Sage Networks.
Bom, vamos lá.
Okay, so we're going to debate a very important topic. However, it's sort of invisible, this topic, with this request for blocking IPs, URLs, domain names, most of all when it comes to fighting illegal IPTV in Brazil. We've seen technical impacts caused by the way these requests take place and by the way they've been implemented. So there were requests of blocking IPs that are shared IPs, attempts to block URL, lists without an expiring date, requests for confidentiality, and we want to reflect on that, bring this subject to the panel, understand what's going on, and we want to also debate the risks for the internet. So I'm going to ask the first question for our panelists, and I'll also take a seat. So just to kick off and give some context on this debate, we know that providers receive IP blocking requests, URL blocking, in this context to fight pirate content and illegal IPTV. So how does this process take place? Who's deciding? Who's executing? What is the technical groundwork to do that? What are the legal aspects necessary? If you can please comment, I don't know who would like to begin. Good morning, everyone. Good morning also to those of you watching online. Well, regarding blocking, the legal system decides. It has to be the legal system, courts. This is the only way to deal with something so complex, which is, removing content without being unfair. Usually, the process is, the interested party who wants to remove content because that content breaches some regulation or, it's a violation, it's an infringement of copyrights, or it's damaging someone's image. You file a request in a court, you present evidence, and then the courts decide based on that. But that's not enough. Courts and judges should understand how the technical side of blocking works. Just requesting to block IPs or URLs, some things are difficult to block. Some things cannot be blocked depending on where they're hosted. So, this audience here, most of you are access providers. Access providers, they are capable of executing specific operations. However, there's a limit to what access providers can do. Hence, the importance of the knowledge of decision makers. We need to be, technical knowledge when making these decisions. Many of you have seen this, right, in your daily work. There is a legal order, but the legal order is impossible to be met. And that's what we see, right? So there is a distance between the need for blocking and what is possible, what can be done. Well, institutions that request blocking and that reaches autonomous systems and multimedia communication systems, of course, courts, coming from legal procedures with prosecutors, counsel, following all the steps. But we also receive that from the National Telecommunications Agency, the Finance Ministry, and the Public Prosecutor's Office. These are the three entities that bring these requests for blocking. So not necessarily there is a judge involved. From a managerial perspective, Anatel, the National Telecommunications Agency, they are contacting providers directly. Okay, so besides the requests mentioned by Frediani, those requests filed in courts, there are also requests, administrative requests. So it's not just courts or judges, demanding from providers. Yes, that's correct. Some requests come from administrative bodies. And these are, the main ones, I would say, when it comes to volumes. There's a familiar situation probably here. We have a couple of scenarios here. So in one of them, courts decide, and then courts inform Anatel, the National Telecommunications Agency, and Anatel informs providers. In these cases, we have a legal decision, so it's less controversial. In that case, it's not just Anatel requesting blocking, it is forwarding the request coming from the courts. There's a problem with that, however. What if you operate with the internet and you don't have the CM? You're not going to receive the information. Courts should inform all internet operators in Brazil so that blocking is effective. And they do this through Anatel, the National Telecommunications Agency. There is a gap in this process. And there's also what my colleague said, Ayubi, administrative decisions coming from Anatel. So again, Anatel is the acronym for the National Agency of Telecommunications. Internet is not telecommunications, so Anatel cannot make decisions without first, going to courts and having the decision coming from a judge. These are different situations for some internet providers.
As to the content of the requests from a technical perspective, what are they asking to be blocked? I have mentioned here some components initially, but I would like to hear from you. Is that correct? Are they domain names, IPs, full prefixes, individual IPs? What else? Usually there are three components: domains and subdomains, fully qualified domain name as a combination of domains which are possible to be solved in the internet. Then we have specific prefixes, specific IPs, I mean. I don't remember about prefixes, but multiple individual prefixes in sequence. And URLs. URLs is an order to block what comes after the third slash. URL in the navigator, we have two slashes, then UFQDN and a third slash. Anything which comes after the third slash, it's on the layer 7, and it's impossible to a net provider to see that. We cannot stop or block after the third slash. If I would block an address .com slash something, that slash something is cryptographed by the green locker. The network operator, the DNS, cannot see that information after the third slash, even though the orders with some frequency, they have the URLs with the desire to block one page and not the website as a whole, which lets the internet provider in a deadlock. What will be the authority? And by violating an order, a legal order. So this is just one of the examples of inexequivalent orders that should never be given to a network operator. But the provider has got the DNS server. Why can't they block the URL? Because the DNS goes from the second to third slash www.example.com.br. After that is no longer the DNS domain. The DNS application does not influence what would come after the third slash. So if there is a URL request to a connection provider, to an access provider, that is not possible. But we also get requests from domain names.
Ou, vamos dizer assim, o nome ali de, não é o primeiro nível, mas, por exemplo...
First level, not quite. We can have moreiras.angel.br or www. We might have subdomains, domains or subdomains. Exactly, in the DNS they are okay.
Se bloqueados no servidor recursivo.
They are on the recursive server of DNS provider. We know that some providers, they are now using open DNSs, recursive DNSs, such as the Google DNS 888 or Cloudflare DNS, to avoid treating all these blocks, or also to avoid that they will affect their users. I don't know exactly the reason why. That is part of the question. And the question is, how come some providers which before would use recursive DNSs, now we hear that they are using those open DNSs on a way to be related to the blocks? Is that good? Is that bad to the internet infrastructure? What can you tell us about that? Just about the URL, I will illustrate with an example and how that may drive side effects. If you have a crowdfunding, which is a campaign to raise funds for some reason, you get a request to block that website / the campaign name. How can we, as if it would be possible to block that on a DNS, and sometimes they choose to block the whole domain. You are blocking one website where people that depend on the collection of those funds to pay their employees, you name it, due to one URL. It causes a side effect which will impact people's work, as providers don't know what to do, and also because they have issued an order and they didn't understand that technically speaking, it's impossible that a site provider will block it. That's why it's important to understand that a content block ideally should be done in the origin, in the content, which is more complicated. Sometimes the content is blocked outside Brazil, but it has to be done at the origin of the content. As to the DNSs, Moreira, as a matter of fact, providers which choose to use open recursive DNSs, they cause some issues or damage to their users. We have well-explained internet contents, but that's bad if they're gonna release their recursive DNSs. If I don't have a recursive DNS, this is a problem. Is one problem less. And they may be questioned if they use the recursive. Why are their providers navigating to certain destinations and there is no possibility to block domains? Why is it bad to providers to show recursive DNS providers? External to the provider will severely impact the navigation performance. To run away from daily compliance due to customers' pressure, some providers, they are leaving their own DNS operation and going to an external one. As to the performance impact, The title is 8,888 Reasons for Not Using an External DNS. There is a national study about performance impact, and this movement has to be understood in two ways. Not only provider trying to run away from the DNS, but also users' pressure. How the orders will determine a type of confidentiality in telling the clients that if they ask for support, that increases considerably the number of complaints. And if you are blamed by your customer due to unavailability and allowing access to content, and our client thinks that it's our fault. If your competitor works, so they have been punished by their clients. So that is a search in retail and wholesale markets with internet access, which will have less blockades and less closed internet because they want to access content freely. They are not concerned about the legislation, but a company with a headquarter with employees, they are the ones to be worried about. So the gray internet without blocks will generate globally a performance reduction by the use of external DNS. DNS, they were constructed to be a local provider. I thought, so you got so many reasons, you share so many reasons.
Mas deixa eu te perguntar, por que que isso funciona? Porque, vamos dizer assim, o provedor está recebendo a notificação.
So the provider is getting the notification to block in the DNS a certain domain. Those companies, as far as I know, they operate in Brazil. They don't get the notification. They ignore it. Why do they force them to send 111? So they don't get any type of contact. That is another evidence that internet is not telco. The big techs that offer this external recursive performance, many companies have them, IBM, Cisco, and others. The big techs, they are telecom users. They contract a physical means which will give telco supports, among them DNS. So as those companies that offer DNS service, which is purely internet and not telco, as they are not telecommunications companies, the National Telecommunications Agency does not have that relationship by reports. If throughout telecoms, the reach is just on those companies that and does not get the big techs. So we need the open recursive DNS. That's why this great zone, and then we have the breach for gray internet. In the DNS, even the access providers with the recursive DNS, and they apply the domain blocks, which is the maximum they can do, that can be easily workarounds, because if the user changes their recursive DNS address, there is nothing else that a provider may do, because that is no longer their capacity to do it. And providers to capture that package and to force users to use recursive DNS, that is wrong, because they are violating the legal civil framework, which talks about traffic distinction. That cannot happen. If provider uses the DNS to use it, they are going against a law That's why I insist on saying a content blockade could be done over the content, over the origin, I mean. And the access provider to do it, it's a way of workaround, is a type to fix a more difficult problem, which is the block in the origin, and just that content only. We know that there are providers who capture IPs to themselves, 888 and other IPs, famous IPs, as if the service would be running on their own network. That violates network neutrality, because users, they have to have the right to choose where they want to place their DNS. Of course, that the recursive DNS is the best one, but if by any reason they want to use something else, that is not up to the provider to tell users which one to choose. And the civil framework registers that ethically users, they trust that it's going to get to the final destination. If we change that destination without any transparency, we'll be violating the norms. How about the blocks deadlines? We understand that some of those, they are being requested without any time. They are interrupted for a time frame. I'd like to hear from you if that offers any risk to the internet infrastructure where you accumulate those blockages. And are there any blockages which are requested for critical resources such as root serving DNS, or non-critical resource or an important one, such as a CDN IP or other IPs which are shared by a number of websites or different services, or that could be reused in the future? Today, IP is within a host provider, which is a website that is hosting something related to TV piracy. You block it, and after 3 months, that same hosting provider somewhere abroad will attribute that IP to another client. I'd like to know if those blockades without a deadline, if they represent a risk, and if there is a risk for critical resources and shared resources. And if you have an example, if you have seen that happening before. I have received many blockades requests, and I can guarantee that I never got one single order of a validity time, and I never got another one telling me to unblock. So those blockades, they are accumulated as time goes by. But ideally, they have to go away for you to clean that list. So that's bad, because that will hinder and damages internet depending on the type of blockade. We were talking about DNS, URLs. How about blocking IPs in black holes and prefixes in black hole? That's very serious, to block a prefix indefinitely, not having a deadline, a valid time. It's somewhat worrisome. And those who are responsible for those blockades, they would have to understand that expiry date is important. And if they think that blockade is still required, we have to understand that we have to comply with the expiration date. IPs, they are not permanent, they are temporary and they change. So an IP address blockade is permanent per user, and what is not punished is the offender, the malicious content. Once they perceive they have been blocked, their reaction is to exchange their public IP address, to change the hosting. A malicious or a pirate attack is to escape from the blockades. So they have almost an immediate reaction. What is left to the internet is to have a scarce resource of IPv4 with a governance that you have another that is blocked for all forever. And I said that they are mutants, they are not permanent, and they are shared. So a blockade of one single IP address does not represent the blockade of one site, but a number of services by exchanging the IP or by changing and sharing infrastructure. So I get an yes from Anatel and the judiciary to block those IPs which are a typical CDN, but all services which are hosted in the same IP address, they will be available forever. So we have a scarcity on IPv4, which is allocated on a slow process and which is now being taken out from Brazilian internet. The Brazilian internet, it's no longer using so many IPv4 addresses. And if that internet has been attacked, we internet providers have that burden to continue using that same IP address. And all these new requests, they are sent to the destinations. They never mention the origin. So autonomous systems that operate them, they never know, they never get to know about the blockade. And as I'm talking about social medias, I'm getting a number of requests from companies who need help as they notice that Brazilian internet disappeared in their dashboard. Brazil has been raised. So you have to go for looking glass, troubleshooting, routing. There is nothing wrong until you ask yourself, have we been blocked? And then we keep on investigating. And there are several cases of companies which were nationally blocked. I have personally worked on an important infrastructure of free software, which was nationally blockaded by Anatel's order. ISWestern.com. This is another case that was blocked by Anatel. That is a product of Singapore. And over here, the network carriers, knowing that I would be here, they told me about a blockade case. Right after I executed, my traffic went down around 30%. Why? Because important Google IPs platform were blocked. And he questioned why. And Anatel told them that that was a mistake and that it would be removed. But so far, all his clientele had to ask for support, cancellations, and confidentiality. If that would be transparent, who the responsible for that request would be liable for the mistake. But in that case, is the network operator who is responsible. The client cancels the service because they think was a service failure without knowing that that blockade was done by an authority such as Anatel, and that should be based on transparency. It's amazing that a civil servant who is responsible for that blockade, we can know how much he gets paid due to the transparency, but the decision he makes over Brazilian internet is not transparent. There is no accountability. There is no evidence that if there is or not a piracy involvement, it damages internet and it damages the structure as a whole.
Yeah, this point that IOB mentioned is a pain point. You know, you don't even provide details to your client why they can't access the content. This type of order maybe there is, if you want to talk to a technical expert about the possibilities to block that content. CDN is a case in point. The person making the decisions, does that person understand or deem important to have technical grounds or to ask, please explain to me what is the best way to block it? Many of these companies have legal representatives in Brazil, whether they are CDN or content companies. They have legal representatives. So decision makers or judges, they should actually send the order for the content provider. That's the best scenario. Why don't they do that? Why they don't take that into account so that they can block things in a more efficient manner? Some clarifications might be in order. Do you know how they reach these IP addresses or the domain names? How they choose them to be blocked? Do they run tests? In this context we are discussing here, which is fighting piracy or illegal content, these are IPs accessed by these boxes usually to retrieve content abroad. Do you know how these IPs are discovered by folks who request blocking, whether that's Anatel, the courts, or any other organization requesting blocking? The second clarification is regarding confidentiality. I suppose that you cannot publish the legal order in a website because that might damage the stakeholders or the involved parties. Is that what we are talking about? I suppose you can tell users that there was an order to block, right? Well, the way we read this, there is a sentence at the end of the message, and it says, confidentiality regarding attached files is required. And one of the attachments is the order. So it is confidential. Everyone has the same understanding. So I identify a website that was unduly blocked. I talk to the operator, I talk to supervisors, I talk to internal or to the ombudsman, and they couldn't tell us that the site had been blocked. I ran a test with a major operator, and that happened. So that is the understanding, because there's this sentence. It says attachments are confidential, and the order is one of the attachment. The URLs are public, but the attachment where you have the domain and so on, these are confidential. How do they reach these IPs? How do they reach domain names and URLs? Well, there is a huge variety, in these IPTV boxes. It's essentially a regular streaming operation. There is a playlist and a domain attached to the playlist. And if you want to bypass blocking, they have domains, and the playlist calls on these domains. Most blockings are requested for domains. However, there are the servers that host the streaming services for illegal IPTV that violates copyrights. But how do they have access to that list? Well, probably they looked at the playlist file. That's what I did. You look in the box, in the IPTV box, and you see all the domains. So they probably look at all these domains, but there's no transparency in the process. We are guessing here how they do this. Yes, they don't explain the method, the process to reach the information, to acquire the information. So what you're imagining here is that these boxes are being monitored and that we don't know how these addresses are discovered. That reminds me of something. It was before I worked for NIC or NIC. Someone was doing internet maintenance in the company I worked for, and the problem was that the IP was worn down. I don't know, maybe the whole provider will be worn out. Well, you know, there's pure IP, and now we're gonna have IP that wears out. Yeah, anyway, another thing I wanted to discuss with you. There are some initiatives by Anatel and also private initiatives by some consultancy companies that want to automate the blocking process. What are the reasons behind this idea? Why would anyone automate the blocking process? Are there valid reasons for that? Also, is there a risk on automating this process? Are there inherent risks? Maybe undue use or risk of abuse or risk of technical mistakes? You know, what could automation mean? Well, that's an interesting question. The way this is done manually, it's very slow and complex. The way we receive lists with thousands of URLs, they send us in PDF format, not in text format. And then we request the authorities. We say, okay, to block this, can you send us a file in a more legible format? They never answer. So hence, the difficulty of fulfilling the order, because you have to manually copy and paste all these addresses. There is a lot of margin for error. So the way this is slow, complex, this is actually, it means that automation could be convenient. So you create a problem and you sell a solution. Network providers or operators will want automation. An autonomous system creates its automation, and that it only works for its routers and servers. This is good practice. We try to automate the most we can within an infrastructure. However, centralized automation, you know, like with a central button that someone will press to expel content from Brazilian internet, this is a threat to national security, to freedom of speech, and to our network. Whether that's caused by a mistake or ill intention, or someone invaded the structure and pressed a button. Even manually, we have 20,000 Brazilian providers. They do the rollback, they contact the authorities. Just imagine what could happen if the same mistakes we have today, they are centralized in these DNS routers. This is a risk to our sovereignty, to national security. I think it's going against the origins of the internet. Internet should have several paths, should be resistant to central control. Governance is designed for these purposes, you know, to decentralize the network. And now we are talking about creating a central button, centralized to remove content from the internet. That is a serious threat to everything we've built and to internet. So yes, automating internally, it makes sense, of course. However, a centralized autonomous system, that is a threat to our cybersecurity. Yeah, I agree. Internal automation helps avoiding mistakes, it saves on people. Yes, the company becomes more effective. It's valid for a company internally. The responsibility of applying the legal order, it lies on your legal entity. Your legal entity has to do that, not a third party. You should not delegate that to a third party. This lies under your responsibility as a legal entity. And in this case, automation is welcome. However, the state doing that, it's a tempting tool to be used for other purposes. And just imagine if there's a breach in that, the damage this could cause. So, it's a worrisome idea. The company that receives the order, they have to block. It's a legal order. And if they don't, there are going to be fines or sanctions. There shouldn't be a concern of, surveilling that. We're talking about blocking, right? And blocking is exceptional. And because it's exceptional, it cannot be too easy. It cannot be done just in any way to easily block. You say, oh, it's too easy, so here's another list. We need several people to review that, to authorize blocking, to apply blocking. So I think it's healthy. And always with transparency. Internet, Brazilian society, fighting digital crime, we have nothing to gain from confidential blocking. Why administrative blocking of IP addresses should be confidential? This is absurd. Yes, and if you were watching us today, please don't get us wrong. I don't see a problem with legit blocking. Yes, there are breaches in legislation, violations of private property or, of intimate content. Some blockings are necessary indeed, but maybe not the way it's been conducted. Providers and companies, they play a social role, which is collaborating with the state to stop abuse and to stop violating or breaking the law. Of course, you can block content as long as there is a thorough analysis. It can't be too easy. It can't be done without verification. Yes, these are good points. The goal of this panel is not to go against blocking. What we're trying to say here, or what we're discussing here, is the way blocking is conducted and what are the risks for internet infrastructure. So we're just asking ourselves, is everything being conducted in the right manner? Going back to automation now, let me see if I understand your point. It is difficult to implement this from a provider side. So there's a PDF file. You have to read it. You have to configure it manually. You also have to analyze if the request is correct, if the legal order is there. So there's legal compliance processes. And then there's the technical setting sides. And these two aspects are complicated and expensive, both for small providers and large ones. Of course, large providers probably have compliance departments very much used to that. But small providers, maybe they don't have a person that specializes in that specifically. So that would be maybe one of the things that could have led a group of consultancy companies to come together and automate this process to make it easier for small providers. So these costs are lower. I guess that's one of the reasons, right? Yes, that's one of the reasons. but it's important to differentiate internal automation from centralized national automation. Okay, so you have the internal autonomous system, and then you have initiatives for national and centralized automation, and there's an in-between zone. Some consultancy groups are automating for their free initiative, and this reaches many systems. That might be an incentive to a nationalized or centralized automation. Or maybe this system might become in itself this national centralized system. Well, providers, when they use this type of solution, they're delegating, they're outsourcing a very important responsibility. What if the tool blocks incorrectly or blocks more than what was requested? You know, liability still lies in the hand of the provider. I don't think it's very good to delegate this responsibility for an outsourced party. And what if it's an Anatel tool? But is it centralized? Yes, it's the national centralized automated. I think it poses a cybersecurity threat. Why Anatel? We're talking about the internet here. Well, Anatel has some initiatives for that, right? I was doing my homework here and researching. There's what we call a virtual seal. It's an Anatel initiative. Well, the virtual seal, this is for telecom devices. Okay, this is up for debate. It's open for debate. It's a controversial mechanism. However, telecom devices, okay, but when we talk about blocking IP or URL, Anatel should not be involved. That's what the LGBT says, the Brazilian data protection legislation, LGBT. There's another point I wanted to hear from you. Are these initiatives effective? We've talked about some risks, some problems. IUB mentioned practical cases of undue blocking. We've also covered some potential risks connected to automation and to requests to block things that shouldn't be blocked. Because you might have unexpected impacts or go beyond what you initially wanted to block. My question is, are there any KPIs? Are there systems? Are there indicators that show that these blockings are effective when fighting illegal IPTV or other safety issues? Is this being effective? Do we have anything that proves the effectiveness of that? In spite of the risks we were discussing?
All indicators which I had access so far, they all talked about the number of blockades, but there is no direct correlation to the level of efficacy. What I see subjectively, I don't see any other KPI of quality and efficacy, but what I see subjectively is that on providers, more and more technicians, they find the same devices, and the traffic to them and our monitoring, they keep on increasing as if there were no effect or whatsoever. And I see in some groups dedicated to the pirate IPTV TV, they make some sort of fun, some actions that the agency tries to block the content before games. Even the idea was to create some embarrassing situations for everyone, for a family that is sitting down to watch a football game, and then they block the transmission during the game. And, you know, they make fun saying that even during the broadcasting, all services were able to bypass changing the IPs, domains, and as far as I understand, that has not been very effective in the piracy, and all the load goes over autonomous systems with unmeasurable results. In fact, Ayub, I share the same vision, and I have a number of friends who are legal developers. They are promoters, public prosecutors, judges. And when talking to them, I explained the following and some food for thought. The speed which technology is developing and is able to self-adjust is much faster than any other possibility that the state has to apply any sanction. So they apply blockades from a provider's side, not being very effective, and those who operate technology distribution of illegal content of copyrights or pirate IPTV, they are technically ready to run away after those homologations and not to be concerned about the service continuity. There are two types of requests: private requests that have interest in some type of blockade content. They go to the judiciary, they ask for, and they send it. And there are associations of the media which does somewhat more specific. They go to the judiciary, they ask for a blockade, and then the judiciary should validate the legitimacy. And what they do is to send to the agencies to serve as a legal prosecutor to inform users about the different blockades. And there are two types of blockades. I don't particularly see any specific results or any reports saying, well, we had applied blockade for 6 months to prohibit this type of activity, and this was the type of result that I had, a reduction. I've never seen that before. I wish I could. And that would help to improve the process. Maybe the associations which are interested in blocking this type of content more specifically, maybe they could generate some sort of information that could help the discussions. I have like one long page of questions, which of course we don't have time to answer. But before that, I'd like to know if anyone from the audience would like to ask anything, or those who are remotely. We have just a few minutes left. Let's listen to some questions and then we open. I am Felix Feixos. I'm here wearing a citizen's hat. And the first panel we had, when Anatel has extrapolated a little bit its functions, we know that there is a current discussion and a closed fight about what is a state and about what is economy. It is a type of veiled transformation. The same happened before with publicity, where they created auto-regulation. Is there any initiative in that sense? If we cannot anticipate the state, This is a suggestion and a question at the same time.
Tem dois aspectos na questão da autorregulação,
There
né?
are two
A
things
autorregulação eu
as to
entendo,
auto-regulation.
se eu tiver
I
errado, que
understand
ela é
and
mais no
correct
sentido
me
de se
if I'm wrong.
decidir o
This
que
is more
deveria
on a sense to
sair do ar ou
decide
não.
what should
A
be
gente já passou
removed
por isso,
from
a decisão
air
já
or
foi emanemada
not.
do judiciário. E aí a gente está com um problema agora de
And
como
here we have a
efetivamente aplicar
problem,
esses
which is
bloqueios
how
ou
to
como,
effectively
talvez, a decisão,
apply
então, aquilo
those
que está sugeririndo
blockades.
é que
So
antes de
your
chegar no judiciário
suggestion
se
is
tenha uma
that before we get
autorregulação
to the
para se definir
judiciary, we may have a
Quando
auto-regulation to
presidente,
define it.
insere algumas questões, porque a gente está com pouco tempo, daí
We
vocês
don't
vão
have enough
exercitar suas
time
memórias
and you
aí.
may exercise
Último
your
para, por
memories.
favor.
Sou Yuri. O caso comentado do GitHub, ele é muito
The
emblemático.
GitHub case illustrates two important aspects. First, content provider, which is the origin, is complaining about a number of IPs with a problem. Then you respond that they are not notified where those IPs come from. This is a case where an association sent that to the judiciary asking for that blockade. The judge signed, Anatel was the spokesperson, and the sheet was there. Should we discuss upon that what is being discussed lately at the ITF? Content providers and the origin will participate? Will they regulate? Will they undergo censorship, or are we going to increase the domain orders that we get? Are we going to be involved as a providers community? I am Romualdo Rocha from Marine Telco. So we have some divergences here. Internet is a global computer network. That's simple and straightforward, right? Internet is the union on a number of networks which communicate one to another throughout TCP IP protocols. And since yesterday, you state that internet cannot be regulated by Anatel, which is the only entity which regulates SCM, I mean. The Anatel's license is issued. The SCM license, which regulates all of you, is issued by Anatel. What are you doing together to associations and regionals in Ceará to change that concept? I know that you are going through difficult times. No other judge will approve a sentence to blockade if that is not done on purpose. There is a group within Anatel and carriers who are working on that. What are you doing to work close to the carriers? No one close the boxes that you see in São Paulo, Ceará, and Bahia, those pirate TVs. The idea then is to block not legal content to protect someone, which is a large group of arrays which sell contents, all of them.
Próximo.
Next. I am Thales Rodarte from USP. I am here on behalf of network providers. I manage a number of SLs, and every single day I receive blockade notifications. Third-party colleagues, they should always document any sort of blockades to have a register of what has been requested, how and when, and also to guarantee a communication with the technical team. Sometimes a provider may block it, and the provider is not able to follow it, and it will discover later on that is a blockade. And next, to third-party providers, and provider has short memory. They forget about the blockades, they call, they register a call. Next, it's not up to providers to judge if the blockade is useful or not. I have been in situations where providers, they do not agree with the blockade, but the judicial objective has to be done. If they find out something else, well, this is another story. They have to understand if it will cause any impact or not. This is the trend is to consolidate even more, and providers, they have to have a structure, internal organization to follow it. Some of the blockades, they follow different technical ways, and they have to be applied differently as well. But the process and the validation, they have to be done on an order. So it's not randomly it will happen, it's frequent, it will repeat, and a well-defined process is key to avoid any unnecessary, unpleasant situations. Technical providers, they have to understand the impact of the blockades, DNS, what is the DNS impact, which was requested by a patch or path. We have to understand the impact, being DNS blockades with path, with the IPs which are used as a proxies, because you are going to carry out the blockades, lots of requests, no one will know, and then you need to keep it or to question Anatel, and that will take 5 days apparently, if so, and also to try to understand the impact.
Tem que chegar no final aí que estamos com o tempo estourado já.
Our time is up. Please conclude your question. The provider cannot monitor just by curiosity or to register users which are trying to get content right, or maybe to monitor if that blockade has been effective or not is relevant to get that information. But to know that someone tried to access a bet which they shouldn't, I've seen that. That is fully aligned to the type of notifications. Some of them make clear that this is a confidential information, whereas others not so much. So they have to get organized how to expose that to users. Last week, I had a podcast website which was blocked due to a pet. They want to block one site users, but they end up blocking the whole domain. And the client questioned why it was working here but not there, and provider didn't have a clear answer. Some notifications, they are worth being notified, others not, and never tell your customer how to surpass that blockage. I've seen some saying, I put the Google DNS, it's gonna work. Your competitors saw that this is working, reaches the support, customer service, that site has been blocked, but it's working, and you tell them how to overcome it, even though they say they are not able to access. So never do it. Just explain if that was blocked or not and the reason why, and explain your client how they can overcome, and never say that they should place a Google DNS. This is a great absurd. Please, you have to conclude, my friend.
Os comentários estão muito bons, são muito interessantes.
Your comments are very interesting, but you had exceeded your time. Everybody is hungry, okay?
Rápido, hein? Assim, de forma curta.
Tem uma pergunta aqui no chat.
Please be brief. We have a question from Samir Maya. And closer to a legal online service, which has its service blocked without a legal and confidential process, which are the possible sanctions that we may carry out? We have auto-regulation, we have the GitHub, which asked if someone saw the IPs, if they will have more social discussions, if there was a divergence as to SM, and SM is internet and regulated by Anatel. And at the same time, there is a discussion about other ways of blockade as to repress the box sales. We have a number of recommendations about the provider. Now the last question. 3 minutes to each one of you, including your final consideration, so we can break for lunch. I'll try to make two main points. First, SM, telco, internet, and so on. I don't know if that is a surprise to anyone. It should not be, but there are companies, internet companies, which do not require SCM to operate anywhere, not only in Brazil. It's not mandatory to have an SCM to become an internet provider in Brazil. If you host websites or IP traffic, we have tier one company in Brazil which share large data volume with the United States and Europe, and they do not require any authorization by the agency to operate internet in Brazil because they operate just within a data center, and they're all telco. They will hire a third party. If they hire a Lambda or DWDM from a third party, what should they do? Nothing. There are several companies, internet companies, which do not require GSM, and they are not involved in any type of regulation. Some might agree with me. This is not my own opinion. LGT says that internet is not telco. So in some cases, we have to repeat 100 times in front of the mirror. Internet is not telecommunications. And again, that's not my opinion. Regarding the decision-making aspects, yes, that has to be questioned in the judiciary, but the dilemma is when that decision is impossible. Recently, we got a very worrisome news which will make that more worrisome, where access providers, they have to identify one single users without origin portal request. We, from the technical area, we understand that this is impossible. Imagine to get a decision from the federal court, and then there are no other ways to do it. That is our dilemma. Not that we don't want to fulfill with a decision, but not being able to do it.
Yes, I just wanted to connect all the comments that were made. I'd like to explain that the internet is not a place. The technical community, data can move anywhere in the world. There's always an origin and a destination. The internet is not either supporting information, and there are sovereignties, there are rules. The internet is not a no man's land. This is not correct. Operators are not enemies of intellectual property, but we cannot switch around the property. The destinations, the autonomous systems, access providers, they're not technically appropriate to block content. We have to work together, maybe in a self-regulating body, in a board. We have to look at data centers, CDNs. They are the key point of malicious traffic. That's where we should be blocking. The way it's been conducting, blocking content that violates the internet framework in Brazil. This is not efficient. Pirates are laughing at public power for doing what they do. They still sell the IPTV boxes. If they could, there's a sign that these blockings are not working. So the internet has been damaged by this method, and efficiency is not there. We have to switch this around. We have to block it at the root. Network providers are very helpful. They try to help authorities, but that is hindering the internet. There are many side effects to this process and very few positive effects. Yes, I agree with you. Okay, thank you for your participation in this panel. Let's give them a hand. So we are finalizing the morning session. We are 15 minutes behind schedule. We will be back at 2:15 p.m. Brazil time. And you're all invited, those of you in person here, invited for lunch. Okay, so grab your vouchers. Dessert will be served in the room where we had the welcome coffee. Okay, and that's also an opportunity for networking, and you can also talk to the sponsors who are present. So you can have lunch downstairs, and then please come up for dessert and to chat with our sponsors. Okay, see you later. See you at 2:15 p.m. Brazil time.